Who was Balaam really? Was he a true prophet of the Almighty, or just a greedy diviner selling favors? And why did God give a beast of burden the power to speak? What hidden terror waited on Balaam's road, forcing a heavenly messenger to draw a blade on this journey? We will uncover the entire story of one of Scripture's most complex figures, starting with his strange encounter with a talking beast and leading all the way to his ruinous end, which made his name a warning for spiritual treason. We will explore the ancient history, unpack the deep theology, and see why this dusty, ancient account still carries urgent lessons for believers today. But before we begin our search, if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It truly helps us bring these stories to life. Also, tell us where you are watching from and what time it is there. We are building a global family here. Now, let us begin. The Riddle of Balaam. Picture an old dusty road winding through ancient hills. The sun beats down with no mercy. A rider sits high on his donkey, traveling toward what he believes is his great destiny. Suddenly, the impossible happens. The beast freezes, flatly refusing to budge. He beats the poor beast again and again. Suddenly, she turns and speaks, asking why he strikes her. This beast asks this as naturally as if it were a common thing. The man snaps back, arguing with his mount as though they do this every day. Two souls locked in debate on a lonely desert road millennia ago. This bizarre moment would echo through thousands of years of human memory. Balaam was his name, the son of Beor, a seer whose legacy defies any simple label. Some call him a holy hero, others brand him a villain. The truth lies somewhere between wrapped in shadow and strange contradictions. Balaam spoke directly with God, yet he practiced dark sorcery. He blessed the Hebrew nation with beautiful, inspired poetry, yet he later paved the way for their ruin, seduced by promises of silver and high honor, all while a deadly angel waited with a drawn sword on his path. His journey begins in the ancient Near East, where empires rose and fell like dust storms in the desert. A world where the divine spoke through dreams and a prophet's word could topple kings or crush whole armies. Balaam walked this fine line between cosmic power and earthly politics. His story comes down to us through ancient Jewish scrolls written by people who both respected and feared this enigmatic seer, remembering his beautiful blessings. But they also remembered his bloody end, and both truths shaped how they told his tale. The fascination with Balaam is about much more than a talking animal. Even if that strange roadside dispute is what we remember first. More than almost any other biblical character, Balaam occupies the messy gray zone, caught between holy prophet and pagan sorcerer, blessing and curse, loyalty and betrayal. The historical records show he held real spiritual power. When he spoke, his declarations carried a weight that echoed through generations. Powerful rulers begged for his help. Nations trembled. Still, something about him was always deeply untrustworthy. Ancient scribes struggled to define him. Was he a genuine messenger of the Most High, or just a skilled sorcerer who stumbled into real truth? Even the sacred texts seem torn on the matter. They praise his majestic prophecies while deeply questioning his heart. This very conflict is why Balaam remains so fascinating. He reflects a mirror back at us, our own mix of noble words and crooked deeds, speaking truth while harboring greedy motives. It is the struggle of trying to serve two masters. His beast sees what he misses, an angel with a drawn sword waiting in the road. The stubborn animal saves them both by disobeying. Meanwhile, the blind seer boasts about seeing the future while missing the deadly blade right in front of him. Such irony is sharp. Balaam's drama unfolds against the desert wanderings of Israel. 40 years in the wilderness had forged the nomadic Hebrews into a lethal army as they approached the borders of settled lands. Terrifying rumors of their miraculous victories, conquered cities, and crushed armies marched ahead of them, filling Canaan's kings with deep dread. No one panicked more than Balak, king of Moab. He watched the massive host advance, realizing weapons alone would never stop them. So he turned to spiritual warfare, summoning the most famous sorcerer of the ancient world. Balaam lived far to the north, in Thor, along the great Euphrates River. His fame was vast, and kings regularly consulted him before launching military campaigns. Rich traders sought his favor before embarking on long journeys because his words could build or shatter fortunes. The long trek made by Balak's messengers shows how highly Balaam was valued. They traveled hundreds of miles through dangerous wilderness and hostile lands just to hire him. Such a costly mission proved they trusted his powers completely. Yet, when the seer finally arrived in Moab, the plan fell apart. Instead of cursing the Israelites, he poured out blessings. Instead of breaking their spirit, he praised their future triumph. Rather than pleasing his royal employer, he obeyed a higher command. This ancient drama still raises disturbing questions for modern readers. Can someone speak God's truth while keeping a corrupt heart? Does being used by the divine require personal holiness? Does holy revelation flow through broken, greedy people? Balaam's life offers some very troubling answers. He proves that the Almighty can work through the most unlikely people, and that truth can sound from unexpected mouths. Human weakness does not automatically disqualify someone from a divine calling. Yet his story warns against treating grace as a given. It warns against treating sacred gifts as personal property or assuming that spiritual talent equals actual spiritual maturity. These truths echo across centuries and cultures. Every generation finds something new in Balaam's story, new warnings, new insights, and new questions about the gap between calling and character. Of course, the talking donkey remains the part everyone remembers. But it is not just a cheap trick. That animal's voice exposes deep truths about who actually sees clearly and how easily heaven can speak through the unexpected. Stepping into the full story of Balaam means entering a world that feels both bizarre and familiar. Ancient rituals clash with raw human greed, and divine wonders meet political power struggles. The road to Moab stretches out. Along the way, we will meet far more than just a prophet and his beast. We will face hard questions about power prophecy and the thin, dangerous line where heaven collides with earth. Moab trembled on the edge. Decades of wandering had turned runaway slaves into an unstoppable conquering army. 40 years of miracles had made them fearless. Bread fell from the sky every morning. Water gushed from bare stone. Their clothes never wore out. Their sandals never wore out. They crawled forward like a slow, completely unstoppable brush fire. Every stop became a massive city of tents. Every march brought them closer to the promised land. The harsh wilderness had been their school. Hardship was their teacher. Word of their terrifying victories raced ahead like thunder. The total destruction of the Amorite kings Sihon and Og sent panic through the hills. These were not minor tribal clashes. They were full-scale invasions of old established nations. Sihon had ruled Heshbon with an iron fist. His territory covered the fertile plains east of the Jordan. His armies had never lost a battle until Israel showed up on his borders asking for peace. He said no, and that sealed his doom. The war was fast and brutal. Sihon's seasoned troops crumbled before the desert nomads. Fortresses opened their gates. In a matter of days, his entire kingdom belonged to Israel. Then came Og of Bashan. This giant of a man ruled 60 fortified cities, and his bed was a massive slab of iron 13 feet long. He was legendary for his sheer physical power, yet he too fell as Israel marched. These triumphs reshaped the power dynamics of the ancient Near East. Israel was no longer a band of nomads. They were a superpower. And their God was no longer just a local wilderness spirit. He had crushed ancient empires in open warfare. King Balak of Moab watched this unfold with absolute terror. His country lay directly in the path of the oncoming storm. Sure, the Jordan River was a barrier, but rivers can be crossed. Walls can be breached. Moab traced its roots back to Abraham's nephew Lot. That made them distant cousins to Israel. But family blood rarely prevented ancient bloodbaths. If anything, it made the hatred worse. The Moabites had built their homes along the eastern Dead Sea. Their territory reached across fertile hills and valleys. They controlled the highly lucrative trade routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia. Trade and agriculture made them rich. Balak had inherited a stable, prosperous kingdom. His people lived in peace. His soldiers kept the borders safe and orderly. His treasuries overflowed with enough gold to buy his way out of almost any crisis. But Israel's shadow changed everything. His generals had zero answers. Moab's troops were no match for battle-hardened conquerors. Their fortress walls would crumble against soldiers backed by the Almighty. Diplomacy was useless. The Israelites showed absolutely no interest in making deals. They had refused to negotiate with Sihon or Og. They just demanded passage, and when refused, they took everything. Bribes would not work either. Israel carried their own provisions. They did not need trade or market access. They wanted land to settle, not temporary payoffs. Balak was trapped. Normal military tactics were completely useless. He had no weapons that could pierce divine protection. His allies offered no real help. The pressure was crushing. Every morning Israel was closer. Every evening their campfires crept closer to his cities. Their fires covered the hills like fallen stars. Every night the scouts brought back the exact same report. Thousands of tents stretched out in perfect, terrifying order. Smoke rising from countless fires. A low hum of voices drifting across the valley. An entire nation on the move. Balak could not sleep. How do you fight an army that never seems to lose a single man? How do you negotiate with people who claim God commands their every move? How do you fight when defeat is guaranteed? His war room was in a state of absolute panic. Some urged immediate flight. Better to lose the throne than to watch everyone die. Others suggested giving up. Surrender might get them slightly better terms than a hopeless fight. A few brave voices urged a preemptive strike. Hit them first while they camp across the border. Use Moab's home turf to gain an edge. Make the invaders bleed for every single mile of dirt they claim. Yet Balak knew that was useless. Pure muscle had not saved Sihon or Og. High stone walls had not protected their towns either. Hardened soldiers still fell. That cold panic drove the king to try something entirely different. If normal warfare could not stop Israel, maybe spiritual warfare could. If bronze and iron failed, perhaps unseen supernatural forces would do the trick. Back then, people knew a curse was a real weapon if the right tongue spoke it. It could shatter an army faster than swords. Curses could rot enemies with sickness and fear, turning easy victory into absolute ruin. But real cursing took rare talent. You could not just whisper empty words. The best curse weavers held a terrifying mix of hidden knowledge, raw power, and dark divine connection. Balak knew of just the man a seer whispered about, far beyond Moab. Mighty rulers summoned him before going to war. What he blessed flourished, and what he cursed lay in ruins. His name was Balaam, the son of Beor. Sending for him was a gamble born of absolute desperation, hoping unseen forces might succeed where physical spears had failed. There were simply no other choices left. But the sheer distance made it difficult. Balaam lived in Thor, far away near the Euphrates River. The journey would take weeks through dangerous lands, costing a fortune that would bleed Moab dry. Yet Balak had no choice. Every wasted day brought Israel closer to his borders. Every quiet night only deepened his people's sheer terror. Half measures were over. He summoned his most reliable, fast-riding messengers, men who could speak with incredible, life-saving persuasion. These men understood the gravity of their mission. Moab's survival rested on their success. They began packing immediately. They gathered treasures fit for a legendary seer, heaps of silver, gold, glittering gems, and costly silks. He sent everything needed to show respect and urgent desperation. Balak chose his words with meticulous care. He had to sound desperate but not weak, polite but never submissive. Offering immense wealth without looking like an easy target, Balak climbed to his high palace roof as his messengers prepared to leave. Through the twilight, he watched Israel's campfires flickering. Tomorrow they would be even closer. The day after, closer still. Moab was out of time. Now everything hung on whether one man would ride south and curse Israel. Fate balanced on a razor's edge. Enter Balaam. Far to the north, past the sweeping bend of the Euphrates, lay the old city of Thor. Its markets teeming with foreign traders. Temples housed priests claiming to know 100 gods, and the streets buzzed with foreign tongues. Here lived a man whose fame rippled across the ancient world. Balaam, the son of Beor, belonged to that rare breed of men who seemed to stand between heaven and earth. His spoken words carried weight far beyond their literal sound. His presence commanded quiet respect from kings and beggars alike. The ancient world was crowded with local fortune-tellers, diviners, and self-proclaimed prophets. Every town had its share of mystics claiming to know the mind of the gods. Usually it was just clever guesswork wrapped in mysterious riddles. Balaam was different. His predictions came true with a terrifying, constant accuracy. When he blessed, things happened. When he cursed, the results made even hard skeptics tremble. This was more than just sharp intuition. He had mastered the complex ancient arts of divination that flourished throughout Mesopotamia. He read the flight of birds, studied oil floating on water, and decoded signs in animal entrails. Mastering these skills took decades of intense practice. Yet his gift went deeper than mere technique. When divine inspiration gripped him, his voice changed, making those nearby tremble. His eyes saw right past the present, staring straight into realities yet to unfold. Vivid pictures of the future filled their minds. Mighty kings begged for his counsel before launching wars, asking if they would win or bleed on the battlefield. Should they seal this alliance or flee it? Would the crops thrive or rot? Balaam's answers shaped the fate of whole empires. Wealthy traders sought him out before sending caravans into the wild. His blessing meant the difference between fortune and total ruin. A single nod from Balaam opened doors that remained locked to ordinary men. His approval carried the absolute weight of the gods. Even common folks found their way to his doorstep. Terrified parents sought guidance for their sons. Farmers begged for rain, and travelers pleaded for protection on dangerous roads. Everyone believed Balaam could shape their future. But that kind of fame brought severe dangers too. Rich patrons paid lavishly for his services. His home showed off his wealth, filled with fine furniture and costly decorations. Servants handled his needs while guards watched his wealth. Still, fame drew dangerous, unwelcome eyes. Local priests questioned his spiritual authority, while political rivals whispered that his loyalty could easily be bought. The higher his reputation climbed, the larger the target on his back. Balaam survived by playing a careful diplomatic game. He steered clear of local political fights and refused to curse anyone without divine permission. He kept close ties with many kings, never showing obvious favoritism. This careful balance had worked in his favor for decades. Remaining neutral made him highly valuable to every warring party. Kings trusted him precisely because he did not belong to any single nation. Being an outsider was his greatest asset, not a weakness. Even Balaam could not explain where his prophetic powers came from. Visions simply arrived without warning and without his asking. Voices spoke to him in dreams with absolute clarity. Insights appeared in his mind fully formed, as if placed there by invisible hands. These encounters defied any simple explanation. They never matched the standard rituals written in the ancient books of divination. No magic spell could summon them. They arrived on a schedule far beyond any human control. Over time, Balaam learned to tell the difference between mere intuition and true revelation. Real prophecy carried a weight all its own. It felt far heavier than normal human thought, demanding very specific words. Its consequences stretched far beyond the moment he spoke. This discernment kept his reputation safe. Lesser prophets ruined themselves by claiming a message from God for every random thought they had. They talked too much and promised too much, and their failed predictions exposed them as frauds. Balaam spoke with far more caution. He waited for unmistakable signs from the divine, adding careful qualifiers if any doubt remained. Instead of making things up, he admitted when he did not know. This honesty only made him more believable. His home reflected his unique status. Sitting in a prime location near the heart of Thor, its architecture blended local and foreign styles. Travelers from many different cultures felt at home there, surrounded by a library of scrolls and clay tablets from ancient lands. Wisdom literature from Egypt rested beside Babylonian omen texts. Hittite state letters shared shelves with Canaanite religious poems. Balaam studied all these traditions without ever binding himself to just one. His household was run by servants from many different nations. This diversity was practical as well as cosmopolitan. Hosting travelers with different languages and customs required servants who understood them. Balaam kept in constant touch with other seers across the region. Letters arrived regularly from fellow diviners, priests, and royal advisors. These networks kept him informed of political shifts and religious movements. Yet, despite his global fame, Balaam remained deeply isolated. His supernatural gifts cut him off from normal human connection. People sought him out for miracles, never for simple friendship. They wanted his power, not his presence. This deep isolation shaped a complex man, outwardly confident and commanding, but inwardly insecure and deeply lonely. He could proclaim divine truth with absolute certainty, yet struggled with doubts about his own soul. That inner tension was about to face its ultimate test. Unbeknownst to Balaam, as he went about his day, messengers were riding north bearing an offer that would challenge everything he believed about himself and his calling. The comfortable life he built in Thor was about to shatter. The delicate balance he had maintained between serving the divine and seeking personal profit was going to be laid bare. The reputation he had built over decades was about to face its trial by fire. Change was rolling in like a distant storm. Soon those clouds would unleash winds that would reshape Balaam's entire life and the very future of nations. The prophet who thought he ruled his own destiny was about to discover the limits of human planning. Then came the first summons as thundering hooves shattered the evening quiet outside Balaam's gates. Rising clouds of dust announced the messengers long before they could be seen. These were no ordinary travelers from the local hills. Their horses were exhausted from hard riding over immense distances, and their travel-worn clothes bore the dust of many foreign lands. Balaam watched from his upper window as the riders dismounted. There were 5 of them, each carrying himself with the unmistakable grace of nobility. Their leader stepped forward and demanded to see the famous son of Bor. The urgency in his voice spoke of matters of life and death. Within the hour, Balaam sat opposite the high emissaries of King Balak of Moab. Their leader, a silver-haired diplomat named Bukir, spoke with measured precision. Every word had been rehearsed on their long journey north. Israel is moving toward our borders like a swarm of locusts. Bukir began devouring everything in their path. King Sihon's armies collapsed like wheat before the sickle, and the mighty fortresses of Og of Bashan crumbled at their approach. The other emissaries nodded grimly. They had all witnessed the aftermath of Israel's victories, abandoned cities and scorched fields left in ruins. Terrified refugees fled eastward with tales of a warfare that seemed supernatural. The sheer scale of devastation defied all military logic. "My king offers you wealth beyond your wildest dreams," Bukir continued. "Enough gold to fill your vaults and silver to decorate your palace. Whatever fee you ask will be paid. All we ask is that you come and curse this people for us." Balaam listened in silence. His face revealed nothing of his thoughts. Years of dealing with kings had taught him the value of a slow, calculated response. Hasty words usually led to disaster. This offer, however, was staggering. Balak's messengers had brought physical proof of their promise. Gold coins stamped with the royal image, fine silver vessels of exquisite craftsmanship, and precious gems that caught and scattered the flickering lamplight. It was more wealth than a normal man would see in a lifetime. Yet something about this request deeply troubled Balaam. Cursing Israel felt entirely different from his usual commissions. In the past, clients wanted help against ordinary enemies, rival kings fighting over borders, trade routes, or personal feuds. This situation, however, felt far more dangerous. Israel's recent victories pointed to an uncommonly strong divine favor. Their God had shown power that surpassed anything Balaam had ever witnessed. Confronting such force could end in catastrophe. "Your king's generosity brings me honor beyond measure," Balaam answered, choosing his words with care. "Let me seek divine direction through the night. I will give you my final answer when the morning comes." The messengers traded uneasy looks. They had expected him to agree right away. Very few prophets hesitated when offered such rich terms. Balaam's hesitation suggested either deep wisdom or silent panic. That night the prophet sought the divine presence with absolute focus. He used every ritual learned over decades of training. Incense drifted from his personal altar. Ancient scrolls lay open before him. He cleared his mind of all worldly worries. Then the answer came with chilling clarity. A voice spoke through the pitch-black room. This was no faint impression of the mind. It was a direct, unmistakable command that left absolutely no room for doubt. "Who are these men staying with you?" the voice demanded. Balaam described Balak's messengers, their urgent plea, and their promise of vast wealth. He explained the Moabite king's sheer terror of Israel. The divine reply came instantly, absolute and without compromise. "Do not go with them. You must not curse these people because they are blessed." The heavy weight of this command settled over Balaam. There was no room for bargaining, no alternative offers, and zero chance of compromise. The matter was settled before it even started. At dawn, the messengers waited eagerly for Balaam's response, having spent the night planning their triumphant return. Bukir had already drafted his victory report for King Balak. Success seemed guaranteed. But Balaam's next words shattered their confidence like a hammer hitting glass. "Go back to your own land. The Lord has refused to let me go with you." The sheer bluntness of his refusal left them speechless. He gave them no explanation. He offered no room for negotiating a different path. There was no hint that a better offer would change his mind, just a flat rejection. Bukir struggled to maintain his composure, asking, "Surely the great son of Beor needs more time to consider our king's generosity." Perhaps they had not fully conveyed the king's deep respect for his abilities, but Balaam's face remained completely unreadable. "My answer is set. Nothing you offer can change it. Go back to King Balak and give him my regrets." The messengers departed with heavy hearts and untouched wealth. Their mission was a complete failure. The silver and gold meant to entice Balaam would return to Moab's treasury untouched. Their king's high hopes were about to be crushed by a simple, flat refusal. Riding back south, they argued over what had gone wrong. Had they approached Balaam poorly? Was their initial offer simply too small? Could politics have influenced his decision? None of their theories made sense. Balaam's refusal had felt final, not like an opening bid in a negotiation. His resolve seemed driven by divine restraint rather than human stubbornness. Something far deeper than money or politics was at play here. Meanwhile, Balaam wrestled with his own thoughts about the encounter. The divine warning had been terrifyingly clear. Yet part of him couldn't stop thinking about the fortune he had just walked away from. That Moabite gold could have secured his retirement for life. He had built his reputation on saying yes when other diviners said no. Traveling long distances for wealthy clients was exactly what set him apart from his rivals. Turning down this offer went against everything he built. But the voice in the dark left zero room for doubt. This was not a matter for human negotiation. The decision had been made in realms far above his level. His only job was to obey. The implications troubled him deeply. If Israel enjoyed such fierce divine protection that even whispering a curse was forbidden, what did that mean for the rest of the world? How far would their armies march? Which kingdom would be the next to fall? These dark questions haunted Balaam for days. The comfortable, quiet life he had built was suddenly shattered by a single night of divine warning. He had glimpsed cosmic forces and plans far beyond his usual line of work. He had rejected the first summons, sure, but Balaam knew this was far from over. Kings in desperate situations rarely take a first rejection lying down. Balak would likely try again with higher-ranking nobles and richer promises. When that day came, Balaam wondered if his resolve would hold. The divine voice had been clear about this first request. But what if the situation changed? What if the price went up? What if God proved to be more flexible than he first appeared? He would soon find out. The dusty road to Moab stretched ahead like a quiet test of his character. His choices in the coming days would decide his own fate and the destiny of nations. The second delegation. King Balak received his messenger's report with the sheer fury of a man watching his kingdom slip away. The blunt refusal stung deeper than any complex excuse could have. Balaam had not even given their offer a second thought. He had dismissed them like common beggars. But desperation breeds persistence. As Israel's campfires grew brighter on his border every night, Balak's resolve only hardened. If ordinary messengers could not sway the prophet, perhaps a grander delegation would succeed. This second embassy would dwarf the first in size and prestige. Instead of 5 officials, Balak chose 12. Every single man held a higher rank than the previous group. Their names commanded respect across the region, showing just how desperate Moab had become. Prince Zimri led the delegation. As Balak's eldest son, his presence signaled absolute royal desperation. No king sent his own heir on a diplomatic mission unless his kingdom was truly on the line. Zimri being there spoke louder than any words. This new caravan made the first group of messengers look tiny. Lines of camels carried treasures worthy of a great temple. Exquisite golden bowls from master craftsmen. Beautiful, ornate silver gleaming like trapped stars. Rare spices worth more than gold. Balak had written his message with extreme care, weighing every single word to hit home. Every line was designed to tempt a different part of Balaam. The letter was a masterpiece of political persuasion. "Let nothing hold you back from coming to me," the letter read. "I will give you great honor, and whatever you ask I will do. Just come and curse this nation." It was a staggering promise. "Whatever you ask, I will do." Balak was offering Balaam a share in ruling Moab. The prophet could name his price and get it. They hurried north as fast as possible. Fresh horses waited at every station. Local leaders had strict orders to give the travelers whatever they needed. Driven by royal panic, the riders flew across the hills like wind. Balaam watched them approach with a heavy, conflicted heart. He knew Balak would try again, but not like this. The sheer size of the group smelled of absolute desperation. 12 royal princes do not ride hundreds of miles just to chat. Prince Zimri delivered his father's words with intense formal gravity. Behind him, the other nobles stood in rigid, silent ranks. Their very presence turned Balaam's dusty courtyard into a temporary throne room. This new offer went far beyond anything he had heard before. Not just simple gold, but massive political power. Not a fee, but joint rule. Balak was offering him a crown. "Even if Balak gave me his palace filled with gold and silver," Balaam replied slowly, "I cannot go beyond the command of the Lord my God to do anything, great or small." The words sounded firm and respectful, yet beneath the dignity lay a subtle hint of compromise. He was setting terms instead of giving a flat final refusal. More tellingly, he did not stop there. "Please stay here tonight as well," Balaam said, "so I can see what else the Lord might want to tell me." That invitation changed everything for them. Stay the night, hear what else God says. Balaam was leaving the door cracked for a change of heart. Maybe God's first no was not so final. Prince Zimri's eyes lit up with fresh hope. His father's strategy was working. This grander embassy and the promise of power had managed what the first messengers could not. They had bought themselves a second chance. That night, Balaam prayed once more. But this time his prayer was different. Before, he had simply asked God what to do. Now he seemed to be looking for permission to do what he wanted. God spoke again, but the answer carried a chilling, double-edged quality. "If these men have come to call you, rise and go with them, but do only what I tell you." Balaam lay awake in the dark, turning those words over. Highly conditional permission, only if they came to call him. But they were already there, waiting. What kind of summons did God mean? Perhaps he had to wait for them to formally ask him again in the morning before he made a move. It felt like a technicality he could easily bypass. Morning brought eager faces to his door. Prince Zimri and his nobles had barely slept. They were packed and ready to ride, certain they had won the day. "The Lord has let me go with you," Balaam told them, "but understand, I can only say what he tells me to say." Those princes barely listened to his warning. Just getting him on the road was all they cared about. They could worry about his words later. Getting him to Moab was the main thing. Prep work for the journey began. Balaam's servants packed his gear and saddled his donkey for the long ride south. The massive caravan fell into line, riding beside Moabite nobles. Yet something felt deeply wrong. Wrong with the whole thing. God had said yes, but with a cold, reluctant silence. The warning signs were there. Balaam could feel an ominous shadow hanging over them, but he pushed the anxiety away as the camels began to move. Maybe it was just nerves about leaving his comfortable home. Perhaps God's strict rules were just a warning, not a flat rejection. The road stretched out through familiar country. Balaam had traveled this way dozens of times before. He knew every landmark, every well, every mile. It should have been a simple trip. But as they headed south toward Moab, Balaam could not shake the feeling that he was crossing a dangerous boundary. This journey felt entirely different. The weight of God's heavy gaze pressed down on him with crushing force. Behind them, Thor faded into the dust. Ahead lay Moab, a panicked king, and impossible expectations. In between was a road that would test everything Balaam thought he knew about prophecy, obedience, and the messy clash between God's will and human ambition. This second wave of nobles had succeeded where the first failed, but getting Balaam on a donkey was very different from getting what Balak actually wanted. The road ahead would test if God's will and royal desires could coexist. Then the angel. The morning sun threw long shadows across the dirt as the caravan pressed south toward Moab. The prophet rode his faithful donkey. This was a steady beast, one that had carried him through countless journeys. Behind him, Prince Zimri and the Moabite nobles rode in quiet triumph. Their mission had succeeded. The famous son of Bor was now fully committed to their cause. Before long, King Balak would have his spiritual weapon aimed right at Israel. The entire balance of power was about to tilt. Balaam's mind drifted as his donkey found her way along the familiar path. God's sudden approval still puzzled him. Why would the Lord change his mind? The first refusal seemed so final. Yet somehow this grander delegation had opened a door that was tightly shut before. Maybe it was all about understanding divine priorities. The first request was rejected simply because it was presented the wrong way. But with enough respect and the right price, perhaps even God would reconsider. That thought pleased Balaam. It fed his ego and his pocket. The dirt road cut through a narrow limestone valley. Vineyards blanketed the steep slopes on either side. Heavy clusters of grapes hung from the vines, almost ready for harvest. Low stone walls lined the path, marking old family fields. Balaam's donkey had traveled this road dozens of times. She knew every single bend and climb. Her steady pace showed she was completely at ease. It was the safest path and the most direct. Then, without warning, she froze. Her long ears shot straight up. Sensing something far beyond human sight, her eyes locked onto the path ahead. Her entire body began to tremble with sheer terror. Balaam felt her tighten on the reins. He looked ahead. Nothing out of the ordinary. The path lay open and clear. No bandits lurked behind the stone walls. No wild beasts blocked the way. Yet the beast refused to take another step. "Get moving, you stubborn thing," Balaam muttered, digging his heels into her sides, but she stood rooted, as if bound by invisible iron chains. Losing his temper, Balaam brought his heavy staff down on her back. The blow did nothing but make her shudder even harder. Whatever lay ahead was far more terrifying to her than his stick. Behind them, the Moabite nobles watched with growing impatience. Every delay was dangerous. Israel was moving closer to Moab's borders, and they were running out of time. A stubborn beast could ruin this entire mission. "Maybe we should find another mount for the prophet," one of Zimri's advisors suggested. "This animal is useless for a journey this important." But Balaam knew his donkey. She had never failed him in 20 years. Her fear had to be real. This was not just stubbornness. Something out there had her completely frozen. The prophet climbed down and walked to her head. He spoke softly, checking her legs and eyes for any signs of injury or sudden illness. Everything seemed fine, except for her wide-eyed stare. "What is it, old friend?" Balaam whispered, peering into the empty air. She could give no answer. She just stood frozen in the dust, every sense strained toward a danger that remained entirely invisible to him. They stood there for several minutes, the prophet pleading and then cursing. Behind them, the Moabite nobles grew increasingly restless. Valuable daylight was slipping away over a stubborn animal. Finally, with a sudden jerk, the donkey started forward again.
But she did not go straight.
She veered sharply to the right, crushing herself against the stone wall. Balaam's foot scraped painfully against the rough limestone. She was desperate to avoid the middle of the road. "Control your beast," Prophet Prince Zimri called out, his voice sharp with irritation. "We cannot waste time." Balaam flushed with embarrassment. His loyal beast had never behaved like this in all their years together. Her reliability was the exact reason he preferred her over temperamental horses. Now she was making him look like a fool in front of wealthy clients. He beat her again, harder this time. She winced under the blow but kept scraping along the rock wall, refusing to step into the open. Her breath came in ragged gasps, as if every step took agonizing effort. Up ahead, the path grew even tighter as the stone walls closed in. There was absolutely no room to squeeze by now. She would have to march straight through the gap or stop entirely. Balaam was sure this narrow pass would force her back to her senses. But the moment they reached the pinch point, her terror boiled over. Her eyes rolled back, showing the whites. Foam bubbled at her mouth as she trembled like a leaf in the wind. Right there in the tightest part of the passage, she simply collapsed. Her legs buckled, and she sank to the dirt like an empty water skin. No amount of yelling or pulling could make her get up. She just lay in the dirt, panting. Balaam finally snapped. His reputation was crumbling right before these powerful men. His authority was being mocked by a seemingly mad animal. Decades of careful professional prestige were being ruined by a donkey. Furious, he raised his heavy staff and beat her across the ribs with all his strength. Once, twice, 3 times, the blows cracked loud against the stone walls. She let out a sharp cry of pain but refused to move. "Why have you beaten me these 3 times?" the donkey asked, her voice clear and resonant in the quiet air. The words seemed to hang in the hot dust. Every single traveler heard them. There was absolutely no mistaking what had just happened. She had spoken perfectly in their own language. Balaam stared down at his beast in sheer, paralyzed shock. His staff slipped loose in his grip. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Reality had suddenly walked into a world where beasts of burden spoke like men. Yet in the sheer madness of the moment, he found himself talking back. "Because you have made a fool of me," he snapped, as if this were normal. "If I had a sword, I would kill you right now. Am I not your own donkey, the one you rode your whole life, until today?" The animal went on. "Have I ever behaved like this to you in all our years?" The question hit Balaam with staggering force. She was right. In all their years, the donkey had never once acted without a reason. She had carried him through storms, thieves, and hostile lands. Her loyalty was beyond question. "No," Balaam admitted quietly. He spoke without thinking. The sheer logic of the beast forced the truth out of him. Suddenly, Balaam's vision cleared. It was like scales falling from his eyes. The empty road was empty no longer. A towering figure stood blocking their path, making sense of everything. A warrior angel of the Lord blocked the narrow passage. Not a gentle spirit, but a glorious, terrifying warrior of heaven, radiant in strength. His sword was drawn and ready, the metal itself gleaming with an inner fire. The angel's eyes blazed with raw power. His entire stance held justice and mercy in a tense, perfect balance. He had been there the whole time, invisible to the famous prophet, but fully seen by the donkey. Balaam fell flat on his face. The stick he had used to beat his loyal beast slipped from hands that had lost all power. All his magic could not prepare him for this terrifying meeting. "Why have you beaten your donkey 3 times?" the angel demanded, his voice echoing with absolute authority. "Listen to me. I have come to block your way because your path is reckless." The accusation sliced through Balaam like a blade. Reckless. His search for wealth and prestige was being judged as completely wrong. The permission he thought he had was actually a dangerous test. "The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. The angel continued, "If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you on the spot and spared her." The realization crushed Balaam. His faithful beast had saved his life by disobeying him. The very actions that had embarrassed and angered him were the only logical response to absolute death. The animal saw the truth, while the great prophet was completely blind. "I have sinned," Balaam groaned, his face pressed against the dusty ground. "I did not know you were standing in the road to stop me. If my path is evil in your eyes, I will turn around and go home." He meant every word of it. He had been so blinded by dreams of gold and glory in Moab that he missed the divine hand blocking his path. His donkey had shown far more wisdom than her master, but the messenger surprised him. "Go with these men, but speak only the exact words I give you to say." He was allowed to go. Yet Balaam was now completely bound. He would proceed to Moab strictly as a vessel for God. His own desires were dead. The angel vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving the road ahead empty once more. But everything had shifted in those brief moments. Balaam rose from the dust, a completely different man from the one who had fallen. His donkey struggled up, no longer shaking with terror. She looked at her master with eyes that seemed to hold both forgiveness and deep understanding. Their bond was forever transformed. Nearby, the Moabite princes watched the whole scene in stunned silence. They had just witnessed a strange argument between a man and a beast. They saw their famous guide groveling before empty air. They heard him confessing sins to the wind. Finally, Prince Zimri broke the tense silence with cautious words. "Can you continue, great prophet? We still have a long way to go before we reach my father's kingdom." Balaam nodded slowly and climbed back onto his beast, but the fire of ambition was gone. He was no longer riding toward wealth and a grand promotion. He was marching toward a divine meeting whose outcome remained entirely hidden. The small caravan continued its journey south, but the road felt different now. What began as a search for gold and glory had become a matter of life and death. Balaam rode toward Moab, bound by strict divine rules that would dictate every single word he spoke. Behind them, the narrow pass fell completely silent, yet the memory of that warrior angel would haunt those canyon walls forever. It was a place where heaven and earth met, where a simple beast saw more than a famous seer, and a prophet realized his true calling was far more dangerous than he ever dreamed. On a lonely path between high limestone walls, the impossible had occurred. A donkey had spoken with a human voice, holding a logical debate with her master. Nature itself had bent to serve God's purpose. The line between animal and human had dissolved for a brief, shining moment. Balaam stared at his beast with entirely new eyes. This was no ordinary animal. The creature that had carried him for years possessed a deep awareness that went far beyond his own. She saw a warrior of heaven where he saw only empty space. She sensed danger where he saw only profit. Her initial words still echoed in his mind. "Why did you beat me 3 times?" These were not the random noises of some magical trick. It was clear, articulate speech addressing specific actions with perfect logic. Even more incredible was her reasoned defense. "Am I not your own donkey that you have ridden your whole life? Have I ever behaved like this to you before?" She had pointed to their long history together to prove her loyalty. This was no mindless mimicking of words. The donkey had constructed an argument based on facts. She justified her actions logically. She truly participated in a conversation, not just making sounds that resembled human speech.
These thoughts deeply troubled Balaam.
If a donkey could think and speak when filled with divine power, what did that say about consciousness itself? Were animals just voiceless versions of rational beings? Did they harbor silent thoughts and deep feelings that stayed hidden from human eyes? Years together, countless dusty miles traveled side by side on this road. It had never complained about heavy loads or rough paths. It simply tolerated his sudden bursts of temper without any resentment. Now Balaam wondered what had filled the beast's mind during those long, silent rides. Had it formed its own opinions about their journeys? Did it prefer certain paths or resting places? Had a thoughtful companion been there all along, trapped inside a completely silent body? Suddenly, the beast's behavior that morning made perfect sense. Faced with an armed angel in the road, it tried everything to save them. First, it simply stopped, hoping Balaam would see the danger. When that failed, it pressed hard against the stone wall, trying to squeeze past the danger. Finally, trapped in that narrow path with nowhere to go, it lay down. This was not stubbornness. No, it was a desperate attempt to stop a disaster only it could see. Balaam felt deeply ashamed of his sudden rage. He had beaten a loyal friend for trying to save their lives. His own blindness made him punish wisdom while acting like a fool. The beast looked exactly the same dusty brown coat, the same old familiar scars, patient eyes that had watched 1,000 dawns on the road, the same steady walk. Yet everything between them had changed forever. How do you treat a beast that has spoken to you with a human voice? Do you just keep barking orders? Can you remain master when the servant clearly sees what you cannot? Balaam had absolutely no answers for this. The Moabite nobles riding behind them looked completely stunned. Their worldview had shattered in seconds. They had come north looking for a powerful prophet, but they were leaving with a man outmatched by his own beast. Prince Zimri struggled to keep his royal composure. Their mission was falling apart. How could they explain this strange turn of events to King Balak? Would the king believe his expensive seer was guided by a pack animal? Yet they heard it. No trick could explain it. The beast had spoken clearly in their own language. Its words were logical and made perfect sense for the moment.
This speech revealed a deep character they never suspected. Years of quiet loyalty and patience under his harsh treatment, and a wisdom that saw unseen realms. This forced Balaam to rethink everything he knew about the animals around him. Were other beasts just waiting for heaven's signal to speak? Did creation hold silent depths humans had never dreamed of? The spiritual weight was overwhelming. If God could give speech to a donkey, what else was possible? Could stones cry out? Could the very trees bear witness to what men do? Could all of nature speak when summoned? Balaam's life as a prophet had prepared him for many strange things. He had seen visions that pierced the veil. He had heard voices bringing the truth of heaven straight into his mind. Miracles had always followed his path, but nothing had ever suggested that a simple beast could share in the conversation of God. This shattered his ideas of heaven and earth. The lines he thought were set in stone were suddenly blurred. The donkey kept walking toward Moab at its usual steady pace, but now Balaam watched its ears listening for another word. Would it speak again? Did it know where they were going? Was it aware of the kings and empires hanging in the balance? No answers came as the miles dragged on. The beast had gone back to being just a quiet animal after its miracle. Perhaps such wonders only happen when there is no other way. Even so, Balaam treated the creature with a new, quiet respect. He spoke softly now when guiding it. He made sure it had water and shade. He was no longer riding a tool, he was traveling with a partner.
The memory of those words would stay with him forever. In times of darkness and deep doubt, even donkeys, he realized, can speak the truth of God. It was a harsh lesson that wisdom comes from the places we least expect. Nearing the borders of Moab, Balaam knew his entire quest had shifted. He was no longer just a hired seer riding out for a rich king. He had been swept into a story far bigger than himself. That vocal beast was much more than just a strange wonder. It was a sign of even deeper truths waiting down the road. If God could use a beast to speak, what other wonders lay ahead? The path through the hills was familiar, but Balaam rode on, knowing the ordinary world held secrets he could not see. A donkey had shown him that heaven's message will break through any wall when the moment demands it. They would soon reach Balak's court. The desperate king waited for a curse to destroy his enemies. But Balaam knew his own tongue was now bound by the same power that opened the mouth of his beast. The quiet miracle was over, yet the road ahead would ask even more of him. The prophet, humbled by a beast, was ready to speak only what heaven placed on his lips. Arriving in Moab, the stone towers rose from the landscape like ancient prayers. King Balak's fortress city towered over the Arnon River, its massive stone walls catching the late sun, a promise of safety and power. For generations, these thick ramparts had shielded the Moabite people from desert raiders. Now, Balaam's small caravan crawled slowly toward the city gate as shadows fell across the valley. Guards saw Prince Zimri's banners and threw open the gates. Whispers of the prophet's arrival swept through the streets. The city was electric behind its walls, eager for a glance at the northern seer. Children scrambled onto flat clay roofs. Even merchants left their stalls to witness him. Rumors of Balaam the son of Beor traveled ahead of him, growing wilder with every telling. Some swore he could command rain. Others claimed his blessing made dead fields bloom. Yet the gray-bearded man riding through the streets looked remarkably ordinary, acknowledging the crowd without a trace of vanity. His garments were expensive but plain, suggesting steady competence rather than some cheap magic. King Balak waited in the central courtyard surrounded by his court. Brazen gold jewelry flickered in the torchlight. Heavy incense rose from bronze bowls, while harpists played soft, haunting tunes of forgotten triumphs. The king wore his finest attire, imported Tyrian purple draped over his shoulders, his fingers heavy with gemstones. A heavy beaten gold crown announced his absolute rule, but beneath this display, his hands shook with a quiet panic. Israel's campfires lit up the dark eastern horizon like thousands of fallen stars, and every single night they crept closer to the borders of Moab. Balaam stepped down from his saddle. Servants quickly grabbed the beast's reins. The beast that had spoken divine warnings now looked like an ordinary donkey. "So you have come at last," Balak cried, stepping from his throne. "Did I not send for you repeatedly? Why did you refuse? Am I not wealthy enough to reward you?" The questions carried a heavy mix of profound relief and bitter anger, glad the famous seer was finally here, but absolutely furious that his stubborn refusal had wasted precious days. Balaam bowed deeply before speaking. "Look, I am standing here now, but do I have any real power to say what I want? I must speak only the exact words God gives me." His voice carried a cold warning. He was here, but under strict divine orders that would never bend to a king's wishes. The king thought he was buying a magical weapon, but he had actually invited a completely free voice. He completely missed the quiet warning in the prophet's words. The desperate ruler only cared that the seer was standing in his hall. His savior had arrived. "You honor my kingdom," Balak replied politely. "Tomorrow we will begin the serious work that brought you to this place. Tonight, feast as my guest." The banquet that followed showed off the kingdom's immense wealth. Tables groaned under rare delicacies,
dark wine poured from clay jars stamped with foreign royal seals. Exotic dancers entertained the court, yet Balaam ate sparingly and barely touched his wine. The terrifying highway encounter with the angel was still raw. God ruled his entire mission, not just his spoken words. It was too early to celebrate. Balak leaned close, painting a dark picture of Israel's approaching armies. He spoke of their uncanny victories over massive kingdoms, whispering about the sheer terror spreading through every village. "They cover the face of the earth," the king whispered darkly. "No army can stand against them. No stone walls can hold them. They swallow everything like locusts." Around the room, the nobles nodded in grim agreement. They swapped horror stories of Israel's power. Some had seen the bloody ruins of Sihon and Og. Others had met refugees. Balaam listened in silence. He knew Israel's strength did not lie in steel or horse, but in the Almighty's hand. Defeating them would take more than clever human curses. As the night wore on, Balak's demands grew louder and more specific. He wanted a grand spectacle where Balaam would scream curses at Israel, forcing their entire army to dissolve in panic. He saw himself as the hero king who saved the valley from the Hebrew advance. "Your reputation for ruin is famous," Balak said. "Other kings tell stories of enemies who withered under your breath. Surely Israel will fall just like the rest." But this cheap flattery rang hollow in Balak's ears. Yes, he had ruined men before, but only when heaven allowed it. This time the air felt dangerously different. The God who chose Israel was now holding his tongue. "I can only speak the words placed in my mouth," Balaam replied. "The source of those words is beyond either of us." This cautious answer sent a cold shiver through the lords. They wanted cheap promises of victory, not warnings about boundaries. Yet Balak refused to let doubt ruin his expensive plan. He had risked everything on this prophet. Tomorrow the ritual curses would begin, and his kingdom would be saved. Tonight was for feasting. As the banquet ended, servants escorted Balaam to a lavish room hung with heavy purple silks. A soft bed awaited the tired traveler, and oil lamps flickered gently. But sleep would not come as he stared at the dark. He knew his part in the coming storm, but not where it would end. Heaven's plan stayed hidden in thick fog. Outside his window, Moab's capital grew quiet under the stars. Guards paced along the stone walls on their rounds. People went to sleep, sure that this northern prophet would save them. But Balaam knew the truth was far more complicated than they could ever imagine. He arrived in Moab with heavy warnings from God, words that could shatter the king's hope and decide the fate of entire nations tomorrow. Even the soft bed and palace luxury could not quiet his mind. Just past the eastern walls, Israel was marching closer. Tomorrow he would stand as Moab's spiritual defender, armed only with whatever words God put in his mouth. His stubborn donkey would have to wait until morning, but the animal's quiet wisdom kept echoing in his mind. Sometimes the most faithful servants are those who refuse orders that lead to ruin. Tomorrow would test if Balaam had actually learned what his beast tried to teach him on that dusty road. A talking beast had saved his life by disobeying. Maybe he too had to disappoint a king to serve a higher power. Night settled deep over the royal city, but dawn would bring the first of many shocks for King Balak and his desperate people. The famous prophet hired to ruin their enemies was about to show that God's plans rarely fit into human boxes. First light painted the eastern sky with soft pinks as King Balak led his royal court up to the high shrines of Baal. The king picked this high ridge on purpose. Old beliefs said that curses hurled from the mountain peaks had far more poison than those spoken in the dirt below. Balaam rode right beside the king, quiet and pale. He had barely slept, his mind still twisting over what he was being forced to do. Heaven's limits clung to him like invisible chains, binding his hands but sharpening his mind. Moab's top nobles and most powerful priests marched along. Their presence gave the dark ritual a heavy official gravity. Once Israel fell by supernatural force, these leaders would swear they saw Balaam's magic work. They built 7 altars just as Balaam ordered, a sacred number back then. 7 young bulls and 7 rams stood waiting for the blade. Every animal was picked according to the exact rules he learned during his long training. From this high ridge they could see for miles. Down east, Israel's massive camp spread out like an endless sea of black tents. Smoke from thousands of morning fires drifted up, blurring the early sun. The sight of this massive, silent host sent a shiver through the Moabite watchers. "You can see every single one of them from up here," Balak said, smiling. "Every tent, every flag, their whole force taking over our land. Curse them from up here, and their strength will melt like clay in the rain." Balaam gave a dull nod. He knew how the king thought, but he doubted geography mattered to God. Heaven's voice could find him in a palace, a barren desert, a high peak, or a low valley. The bloody rites began. Priests moved through their tasks with cold, practiced precision. Incense burned hot on every altar, sending sweet smoke upward. They splashed blood in patterns meant to catch the eye of the gods. During all of this, Balaam stayed strangely quiet. Usually he would be busy reading signs and calling on omens. He would normally pull apart warm entrails for secrets, trace the shapes in the smoke, and beg for answers from every spirit. But this morning was dead silent. The voice that had shaken him on the road stayed quiet throughout the whole bloody ceremony. No visions came, no holy light cleared his mind. "I will go off by myself," Balaam finally told them. "Maybe the Lord will meet me there, and I will tell you whatever he reveals." He walked away, leaving the crowd far behind. Out here, far from the king's demands and political noise, he reached out for the power that gave him his voice. The answer hit him instantly. A vision flooded his mind brighter than the midday sun. He did not see Israel, as King Balak did not, as a dangerous mob of invaders, but as God saw them, a holy people walking their promised path. Words started forming, but not the ones they wanted. Instead of black curses to break Israel's spirit, he found himself framing massive blessings that would lift their hearts and seal their destiny. The change was so deep that Balaam barely recognized his own mind. The man who had journeyed south to work for Moab was now a mouthpiece for Israel's God. His career loyalty was being hijacked by a power he could not control. When he walked back to the waiting crowd, he looked completely different. The nervous prophet of last night was gone. Instead, he stood with terrifying authority, his eyes burning with holy light. The prophecy spilled out of him like a flood. He spoke of being dragged from Aram, from the eastern hills, shouting questions that echoed across the windy summit. "How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I condemn those the Lord has spared?" From these high cliffs, he saw them as a people set apart, standing completely alone among the nations. He shouted that their numbers were like dust, too vast to measure. Then he cried out, "Let me die the death of these righteous ones. Let my end be like theirs." The silence that followed was heavy. Every single person on that peak knew they had just witnessed something terrifying. The foreign seer paid to ruin Israel had just sung one of the most beautiful blessings ever spoken. King Balak's face twisted. Confusion turned to boiling anger, then desperation, and finally a cold, creeping panic. Everything Balak planned was falling apart. "What have you done to me?" the king demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "I hired you to curse my enemies, but you blessed them instead." Balaam met the king's rage with quiet authority.
The divine power that made him bless Israel now kept him strong. He felt no need to apologize for telling the truth. "Must I not speak exactly what the Lord puts in my mouth?" Balaam replied. His words carried a chilling warning. The prophet was under a higher control, and Balak could not fight it. Nearby, nervous Moabite nobles shifted in the heavy, tense silence. Their clever plan to destroy Israel had done more than fail. It had backfired completely. Their own highly paid seer had just declared Israel blessed. In the back, frightened whispers began to spread among the court. Maybe they needed swords instead of altars. Maybe diplomacy could work. With one speech, Balaam had stripped away their best hope. But Balak was not ready to yield. Terror made the Moabite king incredibly stubborn. If the first ritual failed, they would try again. A new spot, a bigger sacrifice. Something had to break the prophet's resistance. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky. On the ridge, 7 altars kept burning, sending thick smoke upward. But these were no longer Moabite prayers for victory. They had turned into an offering that sealed Israel's triumph. Balaam stood silently among the pale, sweating officials. He had done his duty, delivering the heavy words without caring about his reputation or the king's promised gold. God's command swept aside all human politics. The long road back to the capital lay ahead of them. But Balak would not let the prophet go. The king was already plotting his next move. If Balaam could not curse them here, maybe a different mountain would yield the curse he wanted. Desperate men do not give up easily. This was only the first round. 3 more times these men would face each other, building toward an ending that neither of them saw coming. Having blessed Israel once, the prophet was bound to do it again, even louder. They descended from the high place of Baal. None of them knew they had just watched the opening act of a divine plan. A story was unfolding that would echo down through the ages. The second attempt. King Balak calculated his next move in a quiet panic as the royal procession traveled down the high place of Baal. The first ritual had been a disaster, but failure only fueled the king's desperation. Israel's massive camp was still moving closer to his borders. Every hour brought them closer. Balak convinced himself that the location was the real problem behind the morning's failure. Maybe the high place of Baal carried some bad omen. A different sacred peak might finally release the curse they needed. Geography was everything. "Come with me to another spot," the king urged Balaam as their feet hit the flat valley floor. "You will only see the edge of their camp, not the whole massive crowd. Curse them for me from there." It made perfect sense to Balak's terrified mind. Perhaps seeing the sheer scale of Israel had shaken the prophet. A smaller view would take the pressure off. Balaam listened to the frantic new plan with cold indifference. He had no illusions about what was coming. The seer knew a change of scenery would not change God's mind. The same power that seized his tongue on the first hill would rule him on the next. Yet he did not argue. Balaam was merely a channel for the divine voice, not the king's personal counselor. It was not his job to teach theology to a stubborn king. If Balak wanted another ritual, the prophet would go. Their next destination lay several miles south, up on Mount Pisgah, in the field of Zophim. Ancient stories claimed this specific peak offered direct, powerful contact with the spirit world. Generations of local seers had come here looking for visions. The long trek gave Balak time to rethink his plans. Maybe the morning sacrifice had been too small. More altars might show he was truly serious about destroying Israel. "Build 7 altars here too," the king ordered when they reached the windy summit. "We need a grander display. Bring 7 bulls and 7 rams for the fire. We must make this ritual grander." Balak believed heavily in the magic of numbers. If 7 altars had failed before, maybe they would work here. He trusted that sacred mathematics would bend the spirit world to his will. Moabite priests rushed to build the altars, crafting them precisely according to the ancient rules. They chose prime animals without a single blemish, then gathered the rare incense and holy oils needed for the dark ritual. Up on the high field of Zophim, the Hebrew tents suddenly looked much smaller and far less intimidating. Instead of an endless ocean of tents, they saw only a few scattered clans. It felt far less terrifying. Balaam watched the preparations with cold professional skill. Decades of practice had taught him how to perform these rituals with total precision. Even when the gods disagreed with the king, the sacred rituals had to be done with absolute respect. The afternoon heat was brutal as smoke from 7 new altars drifted upward. The heavy smell of roasted meat and burning resin filled the air. They had spared no expense to buy a curse. Yet Balaam felt the exact same heavy hand holding his tongue. No amount of expensive smoke could change things. He remained bound to speak only the words God placed in his mouth. He told Balak to wait there by his burnt offering while he went over to meet with the Lord. Once again, he walked away to speak with God in private while the ancient hilltop rituals continued. Yet he knew deep down that changing locations or altering rituals could never shift spiritual truth. God answered him just as quickly as he had earlier that morning. Vivid pictures of a blessed Israel flooded his mind. Words began to take shape, words that would crush Moabite hopes and seal the destiny of the Hebrews. Walking back to the waiting crowd, his eyes shone with a clear, divine fire. The watching nobles knew at once that something real had touched him. Whatever he was about to say came straight from heaven. "Rise up, Balak," he commanded. He spoke with a powerful, commanding voice. "Listen closely, son of Zippor. God is not a human who lies, nor a mere mortal who constantly changes his mind. Does he promise and then fail to act? Does he speak and not make it good?" These first hard words shattered Balak's entire strategy. The king had desperately hoped God might change his mind about Israel, believing he could weaken their divine protection through some clever spiritual manipulation. But Balaam's prophecy showed how foolish that was. God's ultimate plans are far more solid than any human can understand. Whatever God decided for Israel would absolutely happen. "Look, I have been ordered to speak a blessing," Balaam declared. "He has blessed them, and I cannot take it back." The prophet made his total helplessness to curse Israel crystal clear to everyone. God's blessing was fixed completely out of human reach. He has seen no trouble in Jacob, and he has spotted no misery in the camps of Israel. The Lord their God is right there with them, and a king's shout echoes in their midst. This reality was the absolute last thing Balak wanted to hear. Instead of being easy prey for dark magic, the Hebrews were wrapped in the strongest divine protection possible. Their God lived among them as their king. He brought them out of Egypt with the strength of a wild ox. No curse can touch Jacob, and no black magic can harm Israel. People will look at Jacob and Israel and say, "Look at what God has done." The meaning of this for Balak was absolutely crushing. Cursing Israel was completely impossible because their shield protected them specifically against spiritual warfare. Sorcery and fortune-telling, the king's only weapons, were useless. Those exact tools Balak relied on had zero power here. See how these people rise, like a fierce lioness lifting themselves up like a hunting lion? It won't rest until it devours its prey and drinks the blood of the fallen. This final picture cast Israel as a fierce predator destined to sweep away its enemies. Instead of weakening them, Balaam's prophecy declared them totally invincible, chosen by God to conquer. The silence after this second prophecy was even deeper than the first. Everyone there realized that Balaam had not just failed to curse Israel again, he had actually blessed them with far more power. King Balak's face grew pale as his last desperate hope fell apart. Two separate spiritual battles had completely backfired. His expensive prophet was steadily crushing the confidence of Moab while making the Hebrews even bolder. "Do not curse them at all, and do not bless them at all," the king snapped in anger. His demand showed he completely misunderstood how a prophet actually works. He treated Balaam like a hired performer who could simply change his show to please the crowd. God's total control meant nothing to the desperate king. Balaam met his royal rage with a patient explanation. "Didn't I tell you that I must do exactly what the Lord tells me?" His gentle reminder pointed out the king's completely unrealistic expectations. Balaam had warned him from the start that God's will, not human desire, controlled his tongue. That morning should have proven it, but Balak simply refused to accept defeat. His kingdom's survival hung on finding a way to cancel out Israel's spiritual advantage. Since two ceremonies had failed, maybe a third attempt would work, in a different place, with new rituals. The afternoon sun kept sinking as this second prophecy ended. 7 more altars had burned to ashes for nothing. Another high hill had seen Israel blessed instead of cursed. God's plan remained solid despite every human trick. Balaam stood quietly among the furious officials, his spiritual duty done once more. He spoke the hard truth, ignoring the political fallout. God's authority had crushed the king's expectations with absolute finality. Still, he knew this was not over. Desperate kings rarely walk away from their plans after only 2 failures. Balak would probably try a third time, searching for some new mountain and different rituals. The prophet, who had already blessed Israel twice, was ready to do it again. His mouth belonged to God, not to a desperate king trying to buy a curse with gold. Climbing down from Mount Pisgah, the royal court had no idea they were playing parts in a drama already decided long before they ever met. The blessings spoken over Israel would echo through the ages, while the curses Balak desperately wanted would never be heard. This second try ended just like the first, with human ambition forced to bend to the unchanging will of God. But the story was far from over. One last meeting lay ahead, and it would dwarf the other 2 in raw power and prophetic scale. The third prophecy. Balak grew more desperate with every sunrise. 2 attempts had failed. 2 blessings had poured from Balaam's lips instead of curses. The Moabite king felt time slipping through his fingers like sand. Below Israel lay camped their numbers as vast as the stars, their presence casting a dark shadow over his kingdom's future. So the king led Balaam to a new peak, Mount Pur, a sacred site where Baal's presence was said to dwell. Looking down from this height, the entire desert wilderness where Israel camped lay open before their eyes. Campfires dot the plains like earthbound stars. This sight should inspire terror, fueling the curse Balak desperately demands. But something shifts inside Balaam as he gazes down. The Spirit of God settles with a heavy weight, unlike his earlier forced prophecies. Words once dragged from reluctant lips now flow freely as Balaam's resistance melts away completely and his voice grows strong, carrying a deep, resonant power. The third prophecy begins, and the vivid imagery makes Balak's blood run cold. Balaam speaks of Israel as a lush garden by the river. He describes them as cedar trees beside the water. These desert nomads, Balaam declares, will flourish like well-watered plants, their tents stretching beautifully across the valley. Their kingdom will rise higher than Agag. Their dominion will stretch beyond the horizon, growing more specific and far more threatening to Moab's power. Water will pour from Israel's buckets. Their seed will find rich soil wherever it lands, and their king will tower high above all earthly rulers. God brought them out of Egypt with the strength of a wild ox. This same power will consume their enemies, and Israel will break the bones of hostile nations. They will pierce their foes with sharp arrows.
Balaam's voice rolls across the mountaintop like a crack of thunder. He declares that Israel will crouch like a lion, resting like a fierce lioness. Who dares disturb their slumber? Those who bless them will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will face divine judgment. The words hold raw power, carrying an immediate warning for Balak's desperate plans. The king's face darkens with every single word. This prophecy far surpasses the others in its lavish praise of Israel, and Balaam shows none of his earlier hesitation. Instead, he speaks with complete confidence, as if channeling heaven's own view of the great Hebrew camp resting in the valley. When the words fade, a heavy silence hangs over the mountain before Balak's anger finally erupts. He slaps his hands together in pure, furious rejection. 3 times he brought Balaam to curse his enemies, and 3 times the prophet blessed them instead. The king's voice shakes with rage as he banishes him. "Get to your place," he commands. "Flee now. I planned to reward you, but your God kept you back." Balaam responds with quiet, calm dignity. He reminds Balak of what he said from the very beginning. Even if the king offered a palace full of silver and gold, the prophet cannot go beyond the Lord's direct command. Every word must align with his will, leaving absolutely no room for him to invent artificial curses. He cannot speak evil where heaven has declared good. This third prophecy changes everything, and Balak realizes his desperate mission has completely failed. No elaborate rituals, no new locations, and no pile of offerings can alter reality. Israel carries heaven's favor. Moab is up against a blessed people. The king's plans crumble before the prophet's words. For Balaam, this moment is a mix of triumph and tragedy. He has spoken the divine words with unprecedented clarity and power. Yet every blessing he pronounces for Israel pushes his earthly rewards further away. His obedience costs him royal favor, rich treasures, and political influence. The prophet who once advised kings is dismissed and sent away empty-handed. From the heights of Mount Peor, the physical reality of both nations is clear. Israel spreads across the valley floor blessed and multiplying, while Moab huddles within its borders, terrified and begging for some magic to stop the inevitable. Geography itself confirms the message as the third blessing echoes over the landscape. Both men know they have reached the point of no return. Balak's hopes lie in ruins, and Balaam's time as a royal advisor ends right here. The divine words hang in the heavy air, unchangeable and absolute. Israel will indeed flourish like lush gardens fed by the river. Their enemies will fall before them like ripe grain before a harvester's blade. As dawn breaks over Mount Peor, tension reaches its peak, but Balaam does not leave. Balaam should gather his things and begin the long journey home to Pethor. Instead, the prophet remains standing on the sacred height. His eyes hold a distant, hollow look, as if staring past the present moment into streams of future time. The king watches nervously as Balaam begins speaking again. This fourth prophecy comes entirely unsolicited, unpaid, and unexpected. No rituals preceded it, and no sacrificial smoke rises to invite the divine presence. Yet the Spirit moves upon him with fierce, undeniable force, and his words carry the weight of absolute certainty. This final prophecy is completely different from the others. While the first 3 focused on Israel's current blessings, this fourth one reaches deep into future centuries. Balaam speaks of distant days when a star will rise from Jacob and a scepter will emerge from Israel, a coming ruler who will crush Moab's forehead. He will break down all the sons of chaos and strife. The vision expands past Moab's borders, foretelling the conquest of neighboring Edom. Seir will fall under his dominion. Israel will act with great power, and a ruler will destroy all survivors. This prophecy stretches across vast generations, revealing a divine plan far larger than any local political struggle. Balaam's voice sounds otherworldly as he describes this king. The star imagery evokes ancient royal power,
a celestial sign heralding the rise of a great king. The scepter represents righteous authority. He will subdue enemies and establish peace, reaching towards something far greater than simple tribal expansion or military conquest. The prophecy continues with brief warnings for other nations, starting with Amalek. That ancient enemy of Israel will face total ruin despite their current prominence. The Kenites, skilled metalworkers dwelling in rocky mountain strongholds, will see their home destroyed when Assyria carries them away. Ships will sail from Cyprus, afflicting both Assyria and Eber, though these mighty naval powers will also perish in the end. Balaam sees the rise and fall of future empires, the constant shifting of power between nations, and the final establishment of Israel's victory over the region. His vision sweeps across centuries of war and peace, of domination and freedom, of divine judgment and eventual renewal. Balak feels his gut tighten with every word. These prophecies lay out total ruin for his kingdom and every neighbor. The rising king of Israel won't just repel Moabite aggression. He will crush Moab. The blessing Balaam spoke over Israel earlier now reveals its true terrifying weight. A nation favored by heaven is destined to become a conquering empire. This fourth oracle shows prophecy at its peak. Balaam no longer fights the war between his own greed and the voice of the Almighty. The struggle inside him has completely vanished. The divine spirit flows through him without any resistance, stripping away the present to reveal far-off centuries. He is now a raw, open channel for heaven's voice. As the prophecy fades, a heavy silence settles over the peak. The sheer weight of destiny hangs thick in the morning air. Balak has just heard the doom of his people, not just defeat, but total subjugation. The immediate threat of Israel's nearby camp shrinks to nothing next to this future nightmare. His kingdom's freedom is on a timer, measured in generations rather than years. Balaam's transformation appears complete. The seer who dragged his feet, who needed a talking donkey to stop him, now bellows uninvited prophecies with absolute authority. His path, from stubborn sorcerer to willing instrument of God, peaks in this unprompted fourth oracle. Yet dark questions still linger beneath this spiritual triumph. How will Balaam take this abrupt dismissal? Will he quietly accept his lost fortune and just walk back to Mesopotamia? The sheer scale of his divine encounter clashes with his sudden, humiliating loss of status. The man who spoke for God is cast out by earthly kings. The high mountain amplifies the prophecy. From the peak of Peor, Balaam sees more than the physical valley below. He looks straight through centuries of history. This high peak serves as a physical picture of vision that sees beyond human eyes. The holy mountain watches over words that will echo for millennia. As the fourth oracle fades, both king and prophet face an uncertain future. Balak must now prepare his people for their promised defeat. Balaam must face the fallout of speaking hard truth to a furious king. The star of Jacob rises in the future, but its shadow already falls dark across the present. Then comes Balaam's departure. An uneasy silence lingers between the two men. Balak's rage has cooled into a bitter, heavy acceptance. His master plan to curse Israel has utterly failed, replaced by massive blessings and terrifying warnings of conquest. The wealth promised to Balaam remains untouched. The royal honors meant for a victorious sorcerer turn into a cold, empty formality. Balaam gathers his meager things with quiet dignity. His servants load the pack animals for the long, dusty road back to Pethor. The seer, who arrived chasing status and wealth, now prepares to leave empty-handed. His reputation as a prophet remains intact, perhaps even greater now, but his dreams of wealth and royal favor dissolve like clay under a blazing desert sun. Their goodbye carries a heavy mutual disappointment. The king had wanted a supernatural weapon against Israel's advance. Instead, he received a divine confirmation of his worst fears. The prophet had expected massive wealth for his spiritual services. Instead, he learns the heavy cost of obeying God's absolute will. As Balaam's caravan moves out of Moab, the story feels like it should end here. The reluctant seer goes home subdued by his clash with the God of Israel. That wild-speaking donkey moment remains a sharp, almost funny reminder that human pride means nothing to God. The 4 prophecies stand as proof of God's favor on his people, but this clean ending covers up a much darker current. The scriptures only hint at what happens next. Later passages reveal that his life takes a much darker path, and that his separation from Balak's court is not the end of his ties to Israel and Moab. The prophet's journey home becomes a slow march toward ruin. The road back to Mesopotamia lies long and dusty before Balaam's caravan. Quiet days on the trail leave far too much time to obsess over what just happened. The prophet who spoke with the Almighty, who delivered 4 great oracles, who saw visions of heaven, now faces the cold, flat reality of personal failure. His cosmic powers bought him absolutely nothing. On this long walk home, something curdles inside Balaam's soul. It is hard to say exactly when it happened, but seeds of bitterness take root. Maybe the endless, empty miles breed resentment over lost riches. Maybe his pride simply rejects this humiliation after he obeyed every command. The man who blessed Israel begins plotting how to destroy them from the shadows. The scriptures keep a heavy silence about where Balaam went right after he left Balak. This deliberate silence leaves room to wonder about the prophet's mental and spiritual state. His outward obedience to God's commands may have masked a bitter rebellion that now festers in the lonely wilderness. One thing is sure, Balaam's story does not end with his quiet exit from Moab. The seer who was banned from cursing Israel directly will find a back door to ruin them. His failure to secure Balak's gold will drive him to find other ways to get paid. The man who stood in the presence of God will surrender to pure greed. The tragedy is sharpest when we look at Balaam's unique gift. Few people in Scripture ever experience such direct contact with God. God speaks to him clearly, guides his steps, and uses him to deliver massive history-shaping prophecies. Yet this massive gift becomes a curse instead of a blessing. The closer Balaam draws to God's truth, the further he drifts from his own peace. His departure from Moab marks a quiet turning point, though nobody saw it then. The seer must choose between his calling as God's spokesman, with all its limits and sacrifices, or chasing other shortcuts to wealth and power. The long road stretching ahead of him is a picture of the choices that will define his legacy forever. Balak watches the caravan disappear into the shimmering desert heat. He feels a heavy mix of relief and boiling anger. The troublesome prophet is gone, ending a tense standoff. But his words still linger. His oracles hover over Moab like dark storm clouds. The blessings spoken over Israel cannot be undone as they camp in the valley below. Balaam's departure should mean safety from supernatural curses. The enemy's desperate attempt to buy divine favor has failed completely. God has turned curses into blessings, transforming a hostile seer into their champion. Victory feels absolute, but appearances can be deceiving. Just because Balaam has left does not mean his influence is over. He carries away deep secrets about the weaknesses of both nations. He now understands exactly what makes each nation tick. This departure is not the end, but the start of a dangerous new chapter. The dust settles on the road as Balaam's caravan fades away. The immediate threat has passed. King and commoner return to their routines. But beneath this quiet surface, dark new forces are starting to gather. The prophet's quiet exit masks his active role in the unfolding clash between Israel and its neighbors. Let us look at Balaam in the ancient world.
Archaeological discoveries in the 20th century shed unexpected light on Balaam's historical footprint. In 1967, excavators working at Deir Allah in Jordan dug up plaster fragments mentioning a seer named Balaam, son of Beor. This discovery offers outside proof that this prophet existed beyond the pages of Scripture, grounding the biblical account in solid history. The Deir Allah inscription, written in Aramaic around 850 to 750 BC, shows Balaam receiving divine visions of a coming catastrophe. The text paints him as a famous seer whose words mattered to many different peoples. Gods from various nations spoke to him in dreams, warning of upcoming disasters that would strike the land unless they changed their ways. This archaeological evidence completely changes how we view Balaam's status in the ancient Near East. Instead of just being a character in Israelite scripture, he was clearly a famous prophet whose reputation crossed deep cultural and national boundaries. His renown as a seer reached such heights that it was recorded on plastered walls. The inscription's portrait of Balaam differs slightly from the biblical account, yet it keeps the core details intact. Both sources show a man who receives divine visions and speaks powerful prophecies that can shift the fate of nations, operating far outside normal political boundaries. The Deir Allah text especially highlights his role as a messenger of coming judgment, warning of divine anger over human behavior. These unique findings offer a rare window into the world of ancient Near Eastern prophets. Professional seers moved freely between kingdoms, selling their supernatural services to kings looking for guidance. They acted as international advisors, bringing a divine perspective to military decisions. Their reputation could easily span generations and cross cultural borders. The plaster inscription suggests that Balaam's work as a prophet continued long after his famous encounter with Balak in Israel. He remained highly active, receiving visions and speaking over the destinies of various nations. His fame actually grew after the events recorded in the Book of Numbers. The prophet who could not curse Israel kept his prestigious status in other lands. Indeed, the Deir Allah text describes Balaam weeping after receiving a terrifying vision of doom. The gods declared their plan to break the natural order, bringing thick darkness where light was supposed to shine, wiping out fertility and abundance. His raw emotional reaction reveals the heavy burden that a prophet's calling places on anyone who receives warnings of coming doom. This deeply human side gives us a better understanding of Balaam's complex character. While the Bible focuses mostly on his clashes with Balak, the Deir Allah inscription reveals a prophet who genuinely cared about the survival of nations. He was a man who grieved when shown visions of oncoming ruin. This ancient discovery also sheds light on how prophets actually operated. Balaam receives his visions in the dead of night through dreams carrying deep divine authority. He then shares these warnings with public assemblies, likely including local leaders and respected priests. The community took his warnings so seriously, they painted them onto plaster. The physical location of Deir Allah down in the Jordan Valley sits very close to where the biblical events took place, making Balaam's active role in the region's history highly plausible. This site was positioned right along major trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with Egypt and the coast. Prophets working here would constantly encounter different cultures and political shifts. The fact that multiple gods spoke to Balaam perfectly mirrors the polytheistic world of the ancient Near East. While the biblical account shows Yahweh alone speaking to the prophet, the ancient Deir Allah text portrays him receiving messages from a whole pantheon. This difference might point to different stages of his life or simply different perspectives on his role. This discovery proves that Balaam's legendary story resonated far beyond the borders of ancient Israel. His prophetic work left a deep, lasting impact on several regional communities.
After all, the heavy cost of crafting and protecting plaster inscriptions shows that local people valued his prophecies enough to preserve them for future generations. This independent proof of Balaam's massive reputation explains why Balak desperately wanted his help against Israel. The Moabite king was not looking for random supernatural aid, but a prophet whose record of success was undeniable. Balaam's reputation made him the perfect weapon for a desperate king.
These archaeological finds raise fascinating questions. How does the historical Balaam compare to the man we meet in the Bible? Both stories agree on his legendary prophetic gifts and global reputation, yet they differ in the finer details. Such differences suggest that various communities retold the story of Balaam to serve their own unique purposes. The famous Dear Allah inscription shows us how ancient peoples remembered their prophets. They saw seers like Balaam as bridges between the human and divine, translating the will of the gods. Their messages held weight far beyond national borders. It was a world of ancient magic. The Near East was alive with spiritual forces that modern minds struggle to comprehend. Far from mere superstition, divination was a sophisticated art used to uncover hidden secrets. Mighty kings hired teams of scholars to read omens in animal sacrifices and the starry night sky. The line between natural and supernatural was highly fluid. Ancient Mesopotamian texts list hundreds of omens. Trained diviners learned to read meaning in the flight paths of birds, the patterns of oil floating on water, and the smoke rising from holy altars. Every detail carried messages from the gods. Professional seers spent decades mastering these complex systems of divine communication. Their rare expertise commanded royal respect and massive wealth. Emperors of Babylon and Assyria rarely made big decisions without consulting their court diviners. Battles, peace treaties, massive building projects, and even family matters required divine approval, carefully obtained through sacred rituals. This practice ran so deep that royal libraries preserved detailed logs of omen readings spanning hundreds of years. A speaking animal, though rare, fit perfectly into this ancient supernatural worldview. Ancient texts often describe animals delivering divine messages to humans. In Egypt, sacred beasts supposedly spoke the direct desires of the gods. Mesopotamian stories tell of beasts warning humans of floods or revealing hidden truths. Balaam's talking donkey, then, is no random trick, but part of a recognized pattern of spiritual intervention. Prophetic ecstasy was also common in ancient religious life. Prophets entered altered states of consciousness through music, rhythmic dance, heavy incense, and fasting, alongside rigorous ritual prep. In these deep trances, they saw visions and heard divine voices beyond ordinary human perception. This trance was seen as temporary possession by a spirit. Hiring a foreign prophet like Balaam proved that divine wisdom transcended national borders. The gods of one nation could speak through any worthy vessel. A Mesopotamian seer could easily access gods worshipped in Canaan or Egypt. This flexible theology allowed kings to cast a wide net when searching for spiritual assistance. Ancient texts separated spiritual workers into distinct classes. Some were diviners, reading natural signs to predict what lay ahead. Others practiced magic, trying to manipulate spiritual forces for specific results. Others worked as true prophets, receiving direct messages from heaven. Balaam, however, seemed to blend all three of these roles together. The art of cursing was a highly developed science. Professional sorcerers crafted complex rituals designed to bring ruin to their clients' enemies. These rites often involved symbolic gestures, spoken incantations, and the creation of physical objects designed to hold the curse's power. Kings regularly hired these experts against military rivals or political opponents. Conversely, the power to bless was just as sought after. A prophet's blessing was believed to unleash forces that could rewrite the destiny of whole nations. The words themselves carried raw power, acting completely independent of the speaker's original intent. Once spoken, these blessings and curses took on a life of their own, fulfilling their purpose over vast distances. Ancient peoples knew that spiritual power could create or destroy, heal or harm. The very same forces that brought rich harvests could just as easily cause drought and famine. Heavenly favor that built up one king could simultaneously crush his enemies. This double-edged power required careful handling by highly trained masters. The concept of divine authority over a prophet's speech is common in ancient Near Eastern texts. Gods were believed to strictly control what their messengers could say. Even the most powerful prophet could not force the gods to reveal secrets or speak words that went against their divine will. This deep understanding helps explain why Balaam failed to curse Israel, defying both his own desires and Balak's demands. These rituals also required specific sacred locations. High mountaintops, sacred groves, and grand temples were chosen to make communication with the heavens easier. The physical setting directly affected the clarity of the spiritual message. Balaam moving from one high peak to another reflects this ancient belief in the power of sacred geography. Furthermore, the international trade of diviners created vast networks of professional seers who shared techniques and sacred knowledge across cultural borders. These experts formed a guild that transcended local loyalties. A seer known for absolute accuracy would quickly gain fame through these channels, explaining how Balaam's reputation reached all the way to Moab. Ancient texts also reveal the heavy mental and spiritual toll of being a prophet. Seers often spoke of the crushing burden of receiving divine visions, especially when those visions foretold judgment and total ruin. The sheer emotional toll carrying unwelcome divine truths is a pattern found all over ancient texts. Prophets were highly respected, but they were rarely envied. Interpreting dreams was deeply tied to prophecy. People in the ancient world believed the gods spoke through night visions messages that needed expert translation. Professional interpreters used advanced methods to decode these strange symbols and their hidden meanings. Visions of the night were considered highly reliable ways to hear from the gods. Magic and divination were not sins, they were central to worship. The same priests who offered temple sacrifices often doubled as diviners and magical experts. Spiritual power was believed to flow directly from the gods, making all its forms equally valid. The modern lines we draw between religion, magic, and science simply did not exist in those days. This thick supernatural atmosphere explains why people believed Balaam's words and why they were so shocked when his messages consistently favored Israel over Moab. Ancient nations expected prophets to deliver whatever messages the gods sent, no matter what humans actually wanted. The shock was not that a god spoke, but what he said and how consistently it favored Israel. Who was Balaam really speaking to? That question still puzzles anyone reading Balaam's story. Which deity was actually speaking to this Mesopotamian prophet? The text repeatedly says he spoke with the Lord, using Hebrew names for Israel's God. But Balaam lived in a polytheistic world where many gods fought for attention. The theological shockwaves of his story rippled out like stones thrown into still water. For Israel, the answer was simple. Yahweh, the covenant God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, chose to speak through this foreign seer to achieve his own ends. God's authority extends far beyond Israel's borders, ruling over every land and their magical experts. Even pagan sorcerers have to bend to divine will when God decides to use them as his mouthpieces. This truth highlights how God completely transcends human religious labels. Yahweh can speak through anyone, in any place, at any time. Balaam's foreign heritage and pagan background are no obstacle to the divine.
The Lord uses this unlikely messenger to demonstrate his power over all nations, securing Israel's ultimate blessing and protection.
Yet careful readers will spot tension in the story itself. Balaam refers to Yahweh as "my God," suggesting a personal connection rather than forced submission to a foreign deity. His actual methods match standard Mesopotamian practices perfectly. The complex rituals he performed on several peaks look like pagan divination, not Israelite worship. And the famous Deir Allah inscription adds a whole new layer of mystery to the story. This external archaeology shows Balaam receiving visions from a council of gods, suggesting he worked with many different spiritual powers. This polytheistic reality is very different from the biblical story where only Yahweh speaks to the prophet. The real historical Balaam likely operated under religious assumptions quite different from the ones preserved in Hebrew scripture. Some scholars believe that Balaam genuinely worshipped El, the supreme head of the Canaanite pantheon, whom they equate with Israel's Yahweh under a different name. This theory suggests a shared spiritual reality beneath cultural differences. The prophet was not adopting some foreign religion, but experiencing the same divine reality through his own cultural lens. His complete inability to curse Israel was a moment of genuine shock. He finally discovered where his God's true loyalty lay. Another theory suggests Balaam practiced the kind of religious opportunism common among ancient diviners. These professional seers claimed they could contact any god their clients wanted. When Balak sought supernatural aid against Israel, Balaam tried to contact whatever deities were most likely to give them real power. His failures proved that Israel's God had blocked off every other spiritual path. This mystery deepens when we look at Balaam's genuine spiritual gift combined with his deep personal moral flaws. Later biblical writers treat him as a classic warning, a man who sold out his spiritual gifts for personal gain. Yet the actual messages he delivered contain some of the most beautiful and powerful prophecies in the Hebrew Bible. This contradiction shatters our tidy categories. Can a person speak real truth from God while harboring corrupt, greedy motives? The scriptures suggest that God can speak through deeply flawed people without endorsing their character or validating their pagan methods. Balaam's prophecies were truly divine, despite his greed. The story itself hints at the deeper spiritual forces at play. God first forbids Balaam from going with Balak's men, then allows it under strict conditions. This shift in the divine mind reveals a real dialogue between God's will and human choice. God adapts his plans to achieve his goals while still holding us responsible. And the angel blocking Balaam's path reveals another layer of divine intervention. This heavenly warrior opposes the very journey God just allowed. The strange encounter suggests a complex divine will with different purposes acting at the same time. The prophet finds himself caught between conflicting divine signals, demanding absolute discernment. The donkey, seeing the angel, adds immense depth to the story. A simple beast recognizes the spiritual reality that the famous prophet is totally blind to. This brilliant reversal highlights God's utter triumph over human expertise. God can speak truth through the lowest beast while blinding those who claim to have perfect spiritual sight. It is a moment that crushes human pride and shows how close heaven really is. When Balaam finally speaks his prophecies, every word serves the good of Israel, completely ignoring Moab's political demands. These blessings pour out like water, painting a future of power and victory that goes directly against everything Balak wanted to hear. They match up exactly with the ancient promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about the destiny of their children. The fourth prophecy focuses on a coming king of Israel, offering striking proof that God is driving these events. This promise of a savior connects to the deepest hopes of Scripture, pointing toward freedom and a kingdom that will last forever. No pagan god would speak of such hope for Israel. Yet we still do not know if Balaam actually understood what was happening. Did he even realize that Israel's God was speaking through him? Did he see what it meant when he failed to curse these chosen people? The text gives only a few clues about what the prophet was actually feeling during these crucial encounters. The tension between God's will and human choice is hard to resolve. If God controlled Balaam's voice completely, how could he be blamed for his later actions that brought down judgment? But if Balaam had the freedom to choose, why did he fail to curse Israel when there was so much money on the line? There are no easy answers here. The story leaves us with a divine mystery that goes far beyond human logic. God works through flawed people to achieve perfect goals. Truth rises from strange places and blessing flows through stubborn hands. This story invites wonder rather than a neat explanation. Now let us look down at the camp of Israel itself. While Balaam speaks from high peaks, daily life goes on in the massive camp down below. After 40 years on the move, desert life has a rhythm. Tents cluster around tribal banners, creating neighborhoods that match the order God gave them at Mount Sinai. Families wake at dawn to tend their livestock, cook meals, and patch up their temporary shelters under the harsh desert sun. The camp stretches across the plains of Moab like a temporary city. With 600,000 soldiers and their families, nearly 2 million people live here. Just feeding and finding water for a crowd this size is hard to imagine. Yet the community runs smoothly, guided by God's laws and the steady hands of leaders shaped by decades of travel. Right at the center sits the tabernacle, a portable tent where heaven meets earth. Inside the most sacred room rests the golden ark, the symbol of God's presence among his people. Priests make daily offerings, while Levites care for the sacred structure and its treasures. Smoke rises constantly from the bronze altar, carrying the prayers of the people up to the sky. The 12 tribes camp in order around this holy center, just as God commanded. Each group keeps its own identity while sharing in one common life. Family lines matter deeply here, tying households to ancient promises and the lands waiting for them across the Jordan River. The old still remember Egypt, while the young look forward to the land of promise. Meanwhile, Moses walks through the camp with the quiet strength of a man who speaks directly with God. His words settle every dispute, shape battle plans, and explain sacred laws. Yet decades of leadership show on his aging face and tired frame. The man who led Israel out of Egypt knows he will never step into the promised land. His work is ending, and a new generation is rising to inherit the old promise. Joshua stands ready to take over as general and leader. His history in battle and his steady faith make him the clear choice to succeed Moses. The younger crowd looks to him with hope, while the older desert survivors offer their wisdom and support. Change is coming, bringing both fresh opportunity and quiet fears. Still, the camp hums with excitement about crossing over into Canaan. Spies map the land, battle plans are set. The people who once trembled at giants across the Jordan have grown strong in faith. These children born in the desert carry a courage their parents lacked when they first reached the border 40 years ago. But dangerous currents are moving beneath this calm surface. Living close to foreign nations and their strange gods has slowly begun to infect the camp. A few Israelites are getting curious about neighboring customs and beliefs. Their strict faith in one God is under constant pressure from surrounding cultures that seem much more welcoming and easygoing. Almost everyone who lived through slavery in Egypt has died during these long desert years. Most of the adults alive today grew up in the wilderness, raised on miracles and daily guidance. They know the stories of Egypt's cruelty, but they have no real memories of chains. Their bond with God grew in freedom, not out of desperation, which gives them a completely different outlook. Trading with nearby tribes brings both useful goods and subtle temptations. Israel needs items only settled towns can provide, And these business deals open the door to cultural mixing that goes far beyond simple trade. Merchants bring ideas along with their goods, introducing foreign ideas that challenge traditional beliefs. The fact that they are camped so close to Moab only makes it worse. Balak's people watch Israel with a tense curiosity, even as their leaders trade threats. On the ground, ordinary people on both sides find common ground. They share basic worries about food safety and survival, and soon casual friendships cross the border. Young Israelite soldiers and traders cross paths with Moabite women whose beauty and charm prove difficult to resist. It all starts innocently enough, but these spark a deeper connection that threatens their faith. The pull goes both ways, blurring old boundaries. Romance flourishes, crossing old tribal and religious divides. Feasts and seasonal festivals offer even more chances to mingle. Moabite farming rituals catch the eye of Israelites who are tired of the desert and ready to settle down. These foreign rituals seem useful for the farming challenges they will soon face, bringing practical farming advice that clashes with Moses' law. The camp's religious leaders struggle to keep their faith pure while facing the daily reality of living near foreign nations. Priests warn constantly about the dangers of syncretism, the temptation to blend the worship of Yahweh with pagan customs. Yet they also know that total isolation is neither possible nor wise for a people preparing to inherit a crowded, diverse land. Elders still remember the golden calf at Sinai when the people built a false god while Moses was up on the mountain. That disaster brought a terrible plague that killed thousands, serving as a grim warning about the real cost of spiritual compromise. Still, the same temptations return in new ways. The tribal structure that keeps them together also threatens to tear them apart. Each tribe clings to its own traditions, sometimes putting its own needs ahead of the nation. Fights over water, land, and power require constant peacemaking to keep the tribes from splitting apart. With Canaan ahead, intense military training quickly takes over the entire camp. Young men drill with weapons, while veterans share battle tactics learned from fighting desert tribes. A people who started as escaped slaves is turning into a highly disciplined army ready to claim their homeland. Yet weapons alone cannot guarantee victory in the trials ahead. They must keep their faith strong and remain united while adapting to a completely new lifestyle. The desert years taught them to trust God for daily bread, but settling down will test their loyalty in a whole new way. This camp marks a crucial turning point in Israel's history. The new generation, destined to inherit the Promised Land, gathers for the final step of a journey that began with Abraham's call to leave Mesopotamia centuries ago. Their upcoming choices will decide whether they fulfill their divine destiny or repeat the tragic mistakes of their parents in the desert. Meanwhile, Balaam's departure brings a tense, heavy silence over the Moabite royal court. King Balak hides away in his private rooms, chewing on the bitter taste of defeat. His plan to crush Israel with curses has backfired completely. Instead of curses, the hired prophet spoke blessings that practically guarantee Moab's ruin and defeat. His advisors gather in quiet rooms, desperately planning their next move. A military attack looks hopeless against a nation blessed by God. Diplomacy seems just as impossible given the dark prophecies of conquest. Moab's future darkens by the hour as Israel's massive camp looms ever larger on the horizon. Witnesses who heard Balaam's predictions quickly spread the terrifying words across the land. A star rising from Jacob, a scepter coming out of Israel, a ruler who will crush the pride of Moab. These grim symbols haunt the people. People start making their own plans to survive the coming storm. Some urge immediate surrender, arguing that fighting a blessed enemy is useless. Others push for a desperate last stand, preferring death over foreign rule. The kingdom splits between those who accept their fate and those who refuse to go down without a fight. Moab's priests face their own quiet crisis of faith. Their failure to get spiritual help through Balaam raises hard questions about their God's power and willingness to protect them. If a famous prophet cannot curse Israel, what hope is left for Moab worship at Baal Peor, which took place on the very mountain where Balaam gave his worst prophecies, is thrown into total chaos. Priests who claim to speak for the gods now struggle to explain their god's obvious weakness. Devoted followers wonder if sacrifices are pointless. Yet, in this chaos, a new strategy begins to form. Some Moabites start wondering if they should worship Israel's God alongside, or even instead of, their old idols. The prophecies make it clear that Yahweh rules over all lands, not just Israel. Perhaps peace is possible for those willing to submit to this supreme God. These spiritual shifts catch the attention of clever Moabite politicians. If a direct war with Israel is a losing bet, maybe sneaky tactics will work better. The enemy shows signs of inner division, and moral weakness cracks that clever hands could easily exploit. Women became the secret weapon in this plot. Moabite daughters possessed a beauty that could lure Israelite men across any cultural divide. A few romantic sparks might achieve what armies and spiritual curses never could. Capturing their hearts would eventually break their faith and their nation. The plot grew slowly, through quiet whispers and suggestive glances instead of royal decrees. Local families living near the Hebrew camp received quiet nudges to let their daughters mingle more freely with their neighbors. Trade in the marketplace grew, creating easy ways for young people from both sides to meet. Every move was made with careful attention to plausible deniability. Officially, the Moabite kingdom still treated Israel as an enemy, while quiet efforts worked to destroy Hebrew unity and faith. This strategy required deep patience and subtlety, attributes that desperate rulers find incredibly hard to maintain. Meanwhile, refugees from other lands crushed by Israel's advance brought their own bitter advice to the table. Midianite survivors shared intelligence on Hebrew weaknesses, offering tactics that had actually worked in past battles. These foreign voices added urgency to the Moabite plan, offering a practical blueprint. The new plot focused on exploiting Israel's transition from nomads to settled farmers. The older generation had kept strict faith under the watchful eye of Moses, but their children high on the promised land were curious about the farming rituals of their settled neighbors. Moabite, worship offered a colorful escape from Hebrew strictness. While Israel's faith demanded high moral purity and holy devotion, these local traditions celebrated harvest and desire through rituals that indulged the senses and emotions. This contrast appealed deeply to young minds, craving a more tactile, exciting spiritual experience. The cult of Baal Peor adapted its rituals to entice these Hebrew newcomers. Sacred intimacy once kept only for Moabite worshippers was open to foreign guests. Festival feasts welcomed anyone who wanted to ensure a good harvest. Slowly, the barriers between the two peoples began to melt away. Driven by fear, local leaders managed this cultural infiltration with terrifying skill. Messengers moved between towns, coordinating the effort to maximize impact while keeping it hidden from Hebrew leaders. It was a military campaign masked as a cultural exchange. Within weeks of Balaam's departure, the first signs of success appeared. Young Hebrew men started showing up at Moabite festivals and shrines. At first, it looked innocent. Simple trading, casual curiosity, a bit of romance. But every interaction paved the way for deeper, dangerous compromises. This was happening away from King Balak's direct sight, but with his quiet approval. The ruler, who had failed to curse Israel with sorcery, now watched his people destroy them with pleasure. This new strategy brought hope where armies had failed. The irony was thick, especially considering Balaam's recent prophecies of Israelite victory and dominance. The very predictions of Moab's doom pushed them to find a more cunning way to corrupt the Hebrews. Desperation sparked creativity.
prophecy drove them to take bolder, more dangerous risks. As these efforts escalated, the stage was set for a moral catastrophe. It would prove Balaam's warnings right, while burying his blessings in shame. The prophet who could not curse Israel would watch them bring a curse upon themselves through their own choices. The master of the talking donkey would have the last word. Ultimately, the aftermath in Moab became a prelude to a massive crisis in Israel's camp. King Balak's failure to secure supernatural curses was replaced by his people's success in spreading spiritual seduction. The blessed nation faced a threat no enemy army could pose, yet easily triggered by inner weakness. The sin of Baal Peor. The corruption crept in like a morning mist, slowly thickening until it blinded the entire camp. Hebrew youth, drawn by trade and curiosity, found themselves warmly welcomed into Moabite circles. What started as simple business grew into friendly chats, shared meals, and invitations to local festivals that seemed harmless enough. The attraction went far deeper than just romance. After 40 long years in the harsh desert, these young Hebrews craved the comforts of a settled life. Moabite festivals offered music, energy-rich food, and a vibrant lifestyle that contrasted sharply with the strict worship they had known. Forbidden fruit tasted incredibly sweet to those raised on tough rules and high standards. Moabite women welcomed these young men with a carefully planned charm. Their beauty stunned men who only knew the harsh desert where staying alive mattered far more than elegance. These local women possessed a worldly sophistication that desert life could never provide. They represented a world of ease and pleasure, calling like an oasis to weary travelers. The spiritual side of this Moabite welcome emerged slowly, almost without notice. What started as a simple social gathering slowly integrated small rituals honoring the local gods. Baal Peor, the god of fertility and abundance, ruled over ceremonies that promised good crops and personal satisfaction. The worship seemed practical rather than self. This theology promised tangible perks instead of abstract ideas. And those sexual rites, they were the ultimate trap for young men far from home. Temple prostitution was sold as a sacred right to guarantee bumper crops and healthy livestock. It gave holy backing to desires that Israelite law strictly banned. The encounters felt both deeply spiritual and intensely physical, a toxic mix that proved irresistible to many. But these rituals demanded a flat-out rejection of Yahweh's sole claim to Israel's devotion. To join, they had to credit Baal Peor with controlling their crops, practicing rituals that directly shattered the sacred laws given at Mount Sinai. This was deliberate betrayal, not just some slip in morals. The infection spread through the Israelite camp like a plague in a crowded city. Young men shared stories with their friends, talking up the pleasures and benefits waiting just beyond the camp boundaries. The temptation swelled as peer pressure and raw desire drove more Hebrews into Moabite worship. At first, tribal leaders failed to see how bad things were getting. The men felt no shame. They seemed proud, even confident. They talked excitedly about their new Moabite friends, eager to learn farming secrets from these experienced locals. The pagan rituals were hidden under smooth excuses about trade and social ties. Soon these men became vocal cheerleaders for cultural exchange. They argued that Israel's survival depended on making nice with neighbors who actually knew how to farm the land. But any practical gains from blending in seemed small next to the dark reality of their religious compromise. Whispers began reaching Moses and the high priests. Hebrew men were joining pagan ceremonies, and panic started to rise. The aging leader, the same man who had led them out of Egypt, recognized a deadly familiar pattern. Those same people who had danced around the golden calf at Sinai were betraying their God again, seduced by Canaanite fertility rites. Things turned critical when the men began bringing Moabite women right into the heart of Israel's camp. What started casual, brief flings soon hardened into serious relationships, putting their identity and faith in extreme danger. Marrying foreign women who worshipped foreign gods was the exact trap God's law had warned against. These women brought their local gods with them. Small pagan altars popped up inside family tents. Foreign rituals quietly became part of daily life. Children from these marriages were torn between Hebrew heritage and their mother's pagan traditions. The very fabric of Israelite society began to tear. The crisis exploded when public worship of Baal Peor happened right in front of the sacred tabernacle. Hebrew men and their Moabite partners performed crude fertility rites, mocking everything the holy sanctuary stood for. The line between true worship of Yahweh and this cheap pagan imitation was now impossible to ignore. God's patience, worn thin by 40 years of complaining and rebellion, finally snapped under this ultimate insult. The God who had blessed Israel through Balaam's forced prophecies now stood ready to judge them for the deadly consequences of their own choices. The nation that was immune to outside curses now faced divine wrath, triggered by their own rotten choices. A plague struck suddenly with terrifying force. Families who had celebrated their escape from Egypt now watched their children die from a mysterious sickness sweeping the camp. Tents that had just hosted wedding feasts quickly turned into places of agonizing grief as divine judgment took its toll. The death toll mounted hourly, while desperate leaders struggled to understand what was happening and how to stop it. This connection between spiritual betrayal and physical death became undeniable as the primary worshippers of Baal Peor died first. God's justice struck with surgical precision, targeting those who had sparked the crisis. Moses demanded immediate action to stop the rot. The nation that survived Pharaoh's chariots and 40 years of desert hardship now faced its toughest test right on the edge of the Promised Land. This betrayal at Baal Peor threatened to do what foreign armies never could: wipe Israel off the map before they could claim their home. It was a bitter, cruel irony for those who realized this trap succeeded where Balaam's direct curses failed. Balaam's failure to bring down a mystical curse on the Hebrews was completely overshadowed by how easily they cursed themselves through moral collapse. The very prophet who had blessed them against his own will now watched them destroy themselves by making choices that brought the exact ruin he had been paid to deliver. Phinehas gripped his spear. The plague tore through the camp with brutal fury, while leaders argued over solutions and searched for a cure that seemed impossible. 24,000 died as anger consumed a people who were unbreakable from the outside, yet fatally weak to rot from within. The stench of death mixed with heavy smoke from funeral pyres burning day and night. Moses called the shattered nation together. His aging voice rolled across the plains, carrying the authority earned from 40 years of speaking for God. The shepherd who rescued them from Egypt now faced the nightmare of watching them die on the very border of the Promised Land. His words cut through the air with desperate urgency as he ordered the immediate execution of every leader involved in Baal Peor worship. The judges began their grim work, hunting down and judging those whose rebellion brought this holy anger. Yet even as legal trials play out, the deadly plague keeps claiming lives. Human courts are simply not enough to stop this unseen force, which threatens to wipe out the whole nation before they can even set foot in Canaan. In this desperate moment, an Israelite man strides boldly toward the center of the camp, leading a Midianite woman toward his family tent. They walk with shocking defiance, parading their forbidden love right in front of the sacred tabernacle, the very place where God's presence lives among his people. This is a level of rebellion that shocks even a crowd used to moral decay. The woman is Cosbi, daughter of Zur, a powerful chief of the Midianites. Her royal status makes the affair even more scandalous. It is no simple sin.
It points to a political alliance with the very enemies of Israel. The man is Zimri, son of Salu, a leader in the tribe of Simeon, whose high status makes his betrayal deeply poisonous to the community. They slip inside the tent while Moses weeps in grief before the tabernacle, crushed by sorrow, as he watches his people destroy themselves, mocking every sacrifice he ever made to bring them here. This aging leader, who once spoke face to face with Almighty God, now finds himself entirely helpless to stop the unfolding disaster. Human wisdom is useless in a crisis that only God can fix. The crowd stands frozen in absolute shock, watching this ultimate act of rebellion play out right in front of them. The couple's shameless behavior shows complete contempt for God's rule and their own community. Their actions loudly declare that foreign gods and forbidden lovers matter more than sacred promises or the survival of their people. Phinehas, son of Eleazar and grandson of Aaron, the high priest, watches this unfold. Anger burns inside him hotter than the very plague tearing through the camp. This young priest inherited more than just a title. He carries a fierce, deep devotion to God's holiness, one that refuses to compromise with sin. His sacred training and fiery spirit come together, driving him to act while everyone else stands paralyzed. Without a word, Phinehas grabs a spear and follows them straight into the tent. With one powerful thrust, he drives the weapon through both of them, pinning them together in death, just as they were joined in rebellion. A heavy, dark moment. God's judgment executed by human hands. Sin cut down at the source. Holiness guarded from total ruin. The blow lands with such perfect precision that it feels guided by heaven, not just human rage. Phinehas strikes true, ending their lives instantly. In that moment, the ordinary spear becomes a tool of divine justice gripped by human hands, but guided by a higher will. This single sudden act accomplishes what courts and crowds could not do. The moment the spear hits, the deadly plague stops cold in its tracks. This sudden stop is proof of God's approval, showing that both the disease and the cure were entirely supernatural. What Moses and the elders could not fix with laws, a young priest settles instantly. The silence that follows is heavy with God's presence. The Creator, who seemed so distant during this tragedy, now speaks through the courage of a single man who valued holiness over his own safety. Phinehas risked everything to save his people, ready to face the consequences of an act that others might call lawless violence. To Moses, God speaks directly, promising an everlasting priesthood as Phinehas's reward for his loyalty. The man who stood up for God's honor is given a lifelong duty to serve in the sacred tent, right where holiness lives. His family will inherit this office because their father chose faithfulness over compromise. This covenant of peace given to Phinehas builds a lasting legacy out of a moment of harsh violence. God's favor comes from an act some called extreme. The very priest who took up a spear to save his people is now promised safety and peace for all his descendants. The irony here is as deep as the deed itself. Those 24,000 lives lost show the truly brutal price of compromise. Nearly 4% of Israel's adult men died because their leaders failed to stand by God's standards. The death toll far outnumbers any battlefield losses they suffered during their long desert journey. Yet the real tragedy is not the numbers, but the timing. These people died right at the border of the Promised Land, just when 40 years of wandering should have ended in a triumphant entry. Instead, they enter Canaan weakened by an internal rot no enemy could ever cause. This moment shows a kind of fierce zeal that bypasses normal courtrooms when the very life of a nation is at stake. Phinehas shows us that some emergencies require instant action, not slow debate. God's blessing backs up his decision, warning against tolerating sin that destroys sacred bonds.
The spear that pierced those two bodies becomes a symbol of God's refusal to compromise with evil. It shows the need for swift action when slow, cautious steps simply fail. This instrument of death becomes the source of life for a failing nation. As smoke rises from the burial fires and families count their dead, this hard lesson burns deep into Israel's soul for generations to come. A nation that survived the curses of a hired prophet almost destroys itself by flirting with foreign idols. The blessing Balaam could not steal was thrown away by their own choices. These grim consequences show the true cost of the sin at Peor. Yet they also prove God's fierce resolve to protect the people chosen for Abraham's great promises. Human courage becomes the hand of divine mercy, halting the disaster and saving a lost destiny. The priest's spear becomes the tool of deliverance for a community on the brink. Enter Balaam, the antagonist. The story takes a dark, unsettling turn in Numbers chapter 31. Israel prepares for war, and Moses receives his orders. Among the fallen, one name leaps off the page and shocks us awake. Balaam, the son of Beor, dies by the sword. This revelation changes everything. The very prophet who once shouted blessings over Israel now dies on the battlefield fighting against them. The prophet who claimed to speak only for God dies as an enemy. Numbers 31:16 reveals the dark truth. Balaam was the one who told the Midianite women how to seduce the men of Israel. He engineered the moral decay that brought the plague. The Bible tells us this plainly. No drama, no excuses, just the cold fact that Balaam taught Israel's enemies how to destroy them from within. Since curses failed, he suggested corruption. When open warfare was out of the question, he weaponized temptation. This completely changes how we see the earlier story. Suddenly, Balaam's hesitation before King Balak looks very different. His constant prayers start to look calculated, not reverent. Perhaps he was just searching for a loophole to profit while keeping his hands clean. The prophet who spoke with the divine turned into the architect of their ruin. His mouth blessed Israel's future, but his schemes ruined their present. This haunting paradox lingers. How could the very lips that carried God's blessings also design strategies to destroy his people? Ancient listeners would have recognized this trap immediately. Prophets for hire often served many masters. They balanced political pressure while claiming to speak for God, and Balaam was the ultimate sellout. He traded his spiritual gifts for gold and influence. Balaam's death is the ultimate biblical reckoning. The man who tried to curse Israel for money dies fighting against them. His end closes the circle on a story that began with King Balak's desperate cry. What started as a mysterious blessing ends in absolute, terrifying judgment. Still questions linger. Did Balaam honestly believe his advice served some higher purpose? Was he a fraud from the start? Or did he snap after facing the angel? The Bible offers no psychological profile. It simply records his slide from blessed prophet to hated enemy. A dark turn that forces us to re-examine his entire story. His famous blessings now look highly suspect. His devotion feels like pure theater. Even that talking donkey scene feels different when you look at it through his final betrayal. Scripture rarely shows such a total moral collapse. Heroes stumble, yes, but they rarely go completely to the dark side. Balaam shows us that spiritual gifts do not equal spiritual health. Speaking God's words doesn't mean you'll walk in his ways. His death stands as a warning woven into Israel's history. Prophets can become frauds. Having a divine calling won't shield you from a divine reckoning. The same voice that blessed can also scheme. The mouth that spoke truth can deal in ruin. The rabbis had to grapple with this. Jewish scholars struggled deeply with Balaam's contradictions. They couldn't just dismiss him as some pagan sorcerer. His prophecies were too beautiful, too clearly inspired, but his final betrayal demanded an explanation.
This tension fueled centuries of study. The Talmud describes Balaam as a complex man who had real prophetic power, but zero moral compass. In Tractate Sanhedrin, he is named as one of 7 Gentile prophets who truly heard from God. And yet the same texts highlight his greed and moral bankruptcy. Rabbi Yochanan even taught that Balaam's spiritual insight matched Moses in some ways. Both received direct revelations. Both spoke face-to-face with the Almighty. This comparison deeply troubled later scholars who struggled to reconcile such high spiritual gifts with such deep moral decay. Midrashic writings fill the gaps with dramatic details. Some traditions say Balaam held a secret book of divine names. Others claim he could fly or speak with demons. These legends try to explain his power while keeping him clearly evil. The rabbis focused heavily on Balaam's motives. Why would someone with such rare gifts choose corruption? Some say sheer pride caused his downfall. He got drunk on power, forgetting its source. Others blame his greed for Balak's payment. Tractate Avot famously compares the disciples of Abraham with those of Balaam. Abraham's followers showed generosity, modesty, and contentment. Balaam's followers, however, show envy, pride, and greed. This sharp contrast became a lesson on the 2 paths open to us. Rashi built on this. Rashi explains that Balaam's first refusal to curse Israel wasn't virtue but strategy. He knew God's mind and feared the cost of direct disobedience. But when he found a loophole to profit, he took it. The Zohar, Judaism's central mystical text, offers deeper insights, casting Balaam as the dark side of prophecy. Moses channeled divine light to bless, while Balaam twisted that same power to curse and corrupt. Both tapped into the exact same source, but for opposite ends. Some rabbinic writings try to redeem him. They argue his prophecies blessed Israel permanently, regardless of his actual intentions. His words carried divine weight that transcended his flaws. It shows how God can work through broken vessels. Even so, most rabbinic teachings focus on warning us. Balaam stands as the ultimate warning against using spiritual gifts without moral integrity. His story shows that when prophecy lacks righteousness, it only leads to ruin. Rabbis also used Balaam's story to address the struggles of their own times, drawing parallels during eras of persecution. The story is trying to destroy Israel, ancient enemies trying to destroy Israel, and their current oppressors. Balaam's ultimate defeat brought comfort and the hope of God's protection. These traditions transformed Balaam from a minor character to a major teaching figure. His story became a lens for exploring prophecy, morality, and divine justice. The rabbis made sure his complex legacy would continue to challenge readers for generations. In Christian thought, New Testament writers found Balaam to be a powerful symbol for their own growing theology. They turned the complex prophet into a clear warning about spiritual decay. This served vital pastoral needs in the early church. For instance, 2 Peter chapter 2 lists Balaam alongside other famous examples of divine judgment. The letter describes him as a man who loved the wages of unrighteousness, marking greed as his fatal flaw. Peter uses Balaam to warn against false teachers who exploit the church for financial gain. The Epistle of Jude echoes this warning of those who rush headlong into Balaam's error for profit. Jude frames him as the ultimate money-driven leader. His story warns against mixing faith with worldly greed. In Revelation chapter 2, Balaam's teaching is called out as a dangerous heresy infecting the church at Pergamum. This involved eating food sacrificed to idols and sexual immorality. Linking this back to Balaam's old plan to corrupt Israel through temptation drew a direct line between ancient traps and modern dangers. Later early church fathers expanded on this.
John Chrysostom wrote at length about Balaam's moral failures, emphasizing how spiritual talents without virtue lead to complete ruin. Augustine used Balaam's story to study the link between God's calling and personal holiness. Medieval scholars found even deeper layers. Some saw his donkey as representing humble believers who see spiritual truth much clearer than proud leaders. Others viewed his words as predictions of the Messiah, specifically the star from Jacob. Then came the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther saw Balaam as a warning against church corruption, arguing that claiming spiritual authority while seeking wealth was a fatal mistake. This perspective echoed broader Protestant concerns about the morals of clergy. Reformed theologians like John Calvin highlighted Balaam's significance, showing how his story highlights the tension between God's sovereignty and human choice. God used even Balaam's corruption to achieve divine purposes, ensuring Israel was blessed despite the prophet's greedy motives. Puritan preachers found plenty of material here. They used Balaam to warn against the dangers of spiritual pride and selling out. Richard Baxter wrote deeply about Balaam's error, calling it the ultimate betrayal of a spiritual calling for personal gain. Today, modern evangelicals often focus on Balaam as a warning for modern church leaders. His story stands as a cautionary tale about the prosperity gospel and making money off spiritual gifts. Pastors use his example to look at how ministry and money should relate. Meanwhile, liberal scholars take a softer view. They examine the historical context that shaped his image, with some arguing that later biblical writers unfairly demonized a highly complex figure. Catholic views have also shifted over time. While keeping the traditional warnings about greed and false prophecy, modern Catholic scholars also highlight Balaam's positive contributions. His words are recognized as true prophecy, even if his motives were dark. Today, believers focus on practical lessons. Balaam's story speaks directly to modern questions about integrity in leadership and the danger of trading truth for personal gain. His life remains a vital warning for faith communities all over the world. In Islamic tradition, Balaam's story takes on fascinating angles that both match and diverge from Judeo-Christian views. Known in Arabic as Balaam ibn Bawra, he appears in various Islamic texts as a complex figure whose tale offers deep moral lessons. While the Quran does not name Balaam directly, many scholars connect him to a mysterious figure in Surah Al-Araf. That passage tells of a man gifted with divine signs who turned away. Satan pursued him, and he fell into error. This man possessed knowledge of God's most sacred name, but abused it for worldly wealth. Classical Islamic commentators like Al-Abari expanded on this. They originally painted Balaam as a righteous man who used his prayers and spiritual wisdom to protect the people. But everything changed when they drew near. His people begged him to curse Israel. Even knowing it was wrong, he gave in. Islamic traditions paint a terrifying picture. Some stories say Balaam's tongue hung out like a dog's as he tried to curse the chosen people. Other accounts say his prayers turned right back on his own head. These vivid stories stress the danger of abusing holy gifts. Ibn Kathir, a famous scholar, detailed Balaam's tragic slide into spiritual ruin. He explained that Balaam held the greatest of God's names, giving him massive power, yet his hunger for wealth and status slowly poisoned his heart. When he tried to weaponize this sacred knowledge, it backfired. Some old Islamic teachings even describe Balaam as one of the holiest men of his era. His prayers could literally move mountains and call down rain. People traveled massive distances for his blessings, making his eventual fall truly tragic. Holding sacred knowledge carries a heavy weight in these teachings. Balaam represents the sheer danger of wielding holy power without keeping a clean soul. It is a quiet warning. The highest spiritual heights can vanish instantly. Scholars in the Middle Ages used Balaam's story to tackle big questions. They debated how God's sovereign will fits with our own choices. Did God seal Balaam's fate beforehand, or did his own free will destroy him? Different schools of thought had their own answers. The mystics found a deep, hidden meaning in Balaam's journey. They saw him as a symbol of the human ego, which can quietly corrupt even the most saintly heart. His story warns of those subtle traps. Pride and attachment can easily derail true spiritual progress. These Eastern accounts offer striking details missing from our standard Bibles.
They show Balaam's body physically decaying as his soul rotted away. His once handsome face became twisted and dark. His beautiful voice turned harsh. These physical changes mirrored his rotting soul. The story stands as a direct warning to modern religious scholars. Those who claim to hold divine truth bear a terrifying responsibility. Their power to heal or harm is massive. His life urges leaders to stay humble. Today, scholars still turn to Balaam's cautionary tale. Modern teachers use his life to dissect the dangerous dance between religious authority and raw political power. It warns us against selling out sacred values for quick cash. This adds deep, rich layers to our view of Balaam's legacy. It shows how universal his tragic story really is, while offering a unique view on how sacred knowledge must be handled with care. Look at the psychology. Stripping away theology, this is a human tale of war and moral compromise. Balaam stands right before us, a man utterly torn between rival loyalties, slowly consumed by those dark desires that would, in the end, devour him completely. His mind reveals a timeless pattern of human weakness and spiritual drift. On the outside, Balaam looks like a highly successful spiritual leader. His fame stretches across borders, kings beg for his help, and everyone respects his prophetic powers. But that very success likely planted the seeds of his downfall. Fame and influence are highly addictive, even for those blessed with genuine, deep spiritual gifts. His first encounter with Balak's messengers reveals everything. He does not turn down their offer immediately. Instead, he invites them to stay the night while he asks God what to do. That hesitation speaks volumes. A prophet completely devoted to heaven would have refused them right on the spot, knowing that trying to curse God's chosen went against everything sacred. When God forbids the trip, Balaam obeys, but he is clearly disappointed. When a second, far more prestigious delegation arrives, they offer him elite status and massive wealth, putting his fragile resolve to the ultimate test. This behavior reveals a man whose deepest spiritual beliefs are actively at war with his earthly desires. When God finally lets him go on the journey, he seems to ignore the strict terms. God's command is simple: go, but speak only the exact words I give you. But his actions show he is desperately looking for a loophole, hoping to grab the rewards while technically keeping his hands clean before his Creator. His dramatic encounter with the angel exposes his total spiritual blindness. His donkey spots the holy messenger, but the famous prophet is totally blind. This bitter irony suggests that success had dulled his spiritual senses. His famous spiritual gifts had now become the walls blocking his inner vision. The donkey's sudden complaint cuts deeper than any flash of divine anger. When the animal speaks up about his cruelty, it lays bare his inner rage and desperation. He beats his loyal companion because he is under immense pressure, striking out at anything in his way. Meeting with Balak, Balaam manages to show incredible self-control in his public speeches. But keeping up that mask required huge internal effort. Each blessing he uttered for Israel tore him apart, since he desperately wanted to please his rich client. That agonizing tension between what he said and what he wanted eventually broke him, driving the dark advice he would later give. Since he could not curse Israel openly, he looked for a back door to get the job done. This calculated slide into moral decay shows a mind seeking loopholes around divine rules. Balaam's final role, advising the Midianites on how to seduce Israel, shows he deeply understood human weakness. He knew foreign armies had failed, but inner moral rot could easily destroy them. Such insight reveals a dark mix of psychological brilliance and spiritual decay. The prophet's final appearance fighting on the battlefield against Israel shows a complete inner transformation. The man who once blessed them now fights alongside their bitter enemies. Was it a plan from the very start, or did his morals simply erode over time? Perhaps Balaam represents the tragedy of having spiritual gifts without character. His rare talents brought him wealth and high status, but they did not make him wise, humble, or morally strong. In fact, easy success might have stunted the very maturity needed to carry such influence. His story serves as a warning about the hidden traps of spiritual authority. Gold applause and spiritual gifts create a highly dangerous trap. Without character, even genuine spiritual gifts can destroy a person rather than bless them. Let us go back to that talking donkey, one of Scripture's most bizarre encounters. Yet beneath this strange, almost fable-like tale lies a deep reservoir of meaning. This moment is the true heart of the entire narrative. We learn about pride, sight, and divine messages, and it all begins with frustration. 3 times the donkey refuses to budge, and 3 times Balaam strikes her in anger. This repetitive cycle builds tension, stripping away the prophet's mask. His cruelty toward his loyal beast reveals a man completely losing control under pressure. Meanwhile, the donkey's spiritual sensitivity creates a brilliant, ironic contrast. The animal sees what the prophet misses. This upends all ideas about wisdom. Perhaps the simplest, most grounded creatures can recognize the divine far more clearly than those blinded by their own learning and status. When the donkey finally speaks, the conversation sounds surprisingly ordinary. Balaam does not even seem surprised that his animal is talking. Instead, he argues back, defending his anger and venting his frustration. This bizarre exchange highlights either a truly mystical event or a prophet utterly blinded by rage. Then the donkey asks a deeply personal question. "Have I ever done this?" the animal asks, invoking their shared history. She reminds Balaam of years of faithful service. This gentle plea stands in stark contrast to his violent rage over a temporary delay. Then the angel is revealed, changing everything. Suddenly, Balaam sees what his donkey saw all along: a heavenly messenger standing in the road with a drawn sword ready to strike. The donkey's stubbornness was actually mercy, saving them both from death. This sudden realization brings deep humiliation. The famous prophet must admit his humble beast had far better spiritual sight. The reversal is complete. The wise seer looks foolish, while the beast shows true insight. Such twists happen constantly in Scripture, confronting human pride. The angel's warning is stark. Balaam's journey is described as reckless and wrong. Even though he had permission to travel, his corrupt motivations have triggered fierce divine resistance. Real obedience requires a clean heart, not just empty outward compliance. The donkey's rescue becomes a vivid, powerful metaphor. Sometimes rescue comes from unlikely places. Those we look down on can become our shields. The humble often see realities that escape the proud. This entire dramatic encounter acts as a mirror for Balaam's soul. Failing to see the angel reveals his blindness. His explosive cruelty to his donkey exposes a deep inner panic. Arguing with her shows how unhinged his mind has become. This moment also foreshadows what is to come. Just as the donkey spoke against her nature to deliver God's message, Balaam will soon speak against his own greed to pronounce God's blessings. Both events show God's total control, using unlikely voices to speak his truth. This talking donkey scene is the story's emotional peak. All the tension between his greed, God's will, and human desire collides in this single shocking moment of truth. Divine intervention cuts right through the confusion. Modern readers might struggle with a talking animal, but the underlying truth remains incredibly powerful. We all face moments when others see the dangers we completely miss. Our ideas of wisdom are often upside down. Sometimes our saving grace comes from the humblest places, shattering our pride. The talking beast reminds us that truth can come from anywhere. Great prophets and kings often miss what humble servants see clearly. This reversal runs through Scripture, lifting the humble. Here is the great paradox of prophecy. Balaam's story confronts us with a troubling question. How can someone speak God's true words while harboring a greedy, corrupt heart? This uncomfortable truth challenges the simple idea that spiritual talent equals moral goodness. Forcing a deeper look at how God speaks through humans, traditional religious thinking often assumes that spiritual power matches inner maturity. Those who prophesy, heal, or show supernatural wisdom must be deeply good inside. Balaam's story destroys this comforting idea, showing us a prophet whose incredible gifts existed completely apart from his personal character. The Bible leaves no doubt that Balaam's words were real. The blessings he spoke over Israel proved true and lasting. His predictions about future nations carried genuine divine power. Yet the very same mouth that spoke those truths also suggested total destruction. This creates a contradiction that scholars struggle to explain. One view suggests that God can use absolutely anyone to deliver his message, regardless of their soul. Just as God spoke through Balaam's donkey, truth can come from the most unlikely and stubborn places. This view places God's absolute sovereignty far above human cooperation in prophecy. Still, this explanation raises more questions. If God can speak through anyone, what separates real prophets from fakes? How can people judge prophetic claims when moral character is no longer a reliable guide? Balaam's story complicates any easy test for true prophecy. Another explanation focuses instead on timing and how he changed. Perhaps Balaam started out as a true prophet whose honesty slowly rotted over time. Success, wealth, and fame might have gradually poisoned his early goodness. His spiritual gifts remained while his character fell apart, creating the tragedy we see. The story suggests that Balaam's fall happened in small steps, not all at once. His first refusal to curse Israel shows some conscience. His later advice to lead them into sin was a calculated betrayal of all standards. This downward spiral shows that spiritual power offers no shield against moral rot. Balaam's riddle also sheds light on the complex dance between God's will and human choice. He blessed Israel even though he wanted to curse them. It proves that God can accomplish his purposes even through stubborn or flawed tools. God's sovereignty works through humans while rising far above our weaknesses. The story warns us against taking extreme views when judging spiritual claims. We cannot simply assume that supernatural power equals a good heart, nor can we throw out true words just because the speaker is flawed. The real challenge is recognizing God's truth while staying cautious about the mixed motives of human leaders. Balaam's life exposes the deep danger of separating spiritual talents from inner character growth. Powerful gifts without a strong moral foundation create a volatile, highly dangerous situation. The authority to speak for God requires the maturity and honesty to handle such a heavy burden. Today, faith communities still struggle with these exact issues. What do you do with leaders who show great gifts but terrible character? When do you trust supernatural signs? And when does personal sin ruin a leader's message? Balaam's story gives no easy answers, but it forces us to face these questions. The contradiction shows that God's messages serve a much larger purpose than the messenger ever could. Balaam's blessings over Israel fulfilled God's plan no matter what selfish motives the prophet had. This perspective highlights the eventual triumph of God's will even through the messy, complicated humans involved.
Perhaps the most important lesson is that spiritual gifts are loans from God that require real human responsibility. Those who hold them must actively work to grow in character. Separating spiritual power from moral growth leads straight to ruin and, in the end, judgment. Balaam and Balak. Their ancient clash between prophet and king still echoes thousands of years later in our books, politics, and culture. These two men became classic symbols of the timeless human struggles with power, moral decay, and compromise that still play out on the world stage today. Dante put Balaam in his Inferno, placing the corrupt prophet deep among the fortune-tellers in the 8th circle of hell. The medieval poet saw Balaam's true sin as selling out his sacred gifts for personal gain. Dante's vision influenced centuries of Western literature, making Balaam the ultimate symbol of a corrupted faith. Shakespeare's plays echo these same themes without naming him directly. Famous villains like Iago and Edmund show the exact same trait of abusing a trusted position to cause absolute chaos. They masterfully play with appearances and reality, pretending to be loyal while plotting betrayal. Modern political debates often point to situations just like Balaam's. Leaders claiming moral ground while chasing private gain follow his path. The prophet who blessed openly but plotted secretly shows us how political lies work and how public trust is shattered. The toxic bond between Balaam and Balak also speaks to how religion and government mix today. King Balak represents politicians who try to steal spiritual authority to help their own cause. Balaam represents religious leaders who let themselves be bought by the rich and powerful. Today, wealthy preachers and televangelists are often accused of following Balaam's road. Critics say they turned sacred gifts into a business selling prayers and promises for quick cash. This comparison shows these ancient warnings about selling out divine power still apply today. We see the same patterns playing out in modern offices and corporations. Advisors and coaches who tell clients only what they want to hear instead of the hard truth are walking down Balaam's path. The temptation to give glowing reviews just to keep a job is a modern version of his compromise. Even universities and scholars face these identical pressures. Researchers who bend their findings to secure funding face the very same trap as Balaam. The pressure to produce politically safe results can ruin the search for truth, just as royal gold poisoned the prophet's honesty. Social media and modern internet culture make this temptation even worse. Influencers and thought leaders may start with a genuine message, but slowly change their content to chase clicks and revenue. This shift from real truth to staged authenticity mirrors Balaam's spiritual decay. We even see this Balaam and Balak dynamic play out in international politics. Governments looking for moral cover for questionable actions often seek out respected voices to bless their choices. The resulting compromise between belief and convenience echoes the ancient story. Today, with everyone having a voice, we have millions of potential Balaams. Anyone with an audience faces the temptation to sell out their influence or water down their message for approval. The same technology that lets us connect honestly also makes it easy to manipulate and deceive. Even social and environmental movements struggle with this Balaam trap. Leaders who start with genuine dedication can slowly trade their beliefs for funding access or recognition. It is a familiar pattern of good intentions being corrupted by institutional power. The story of Balaam and Balak shows how complicated modern moral choices really are. Their meeting reveals how good and evil can get tangled up defying simple labels. Today's leaders face similar struggles as they navigate conflicting demands. The lasting power of this ancient story is that it refuses to give us easy answers. Balaam remains a deeply troubling figure whose legacy cannot be easily summed up. His example keeps challenging us to look at our own motives and the subtle ways we might compromise our integrity. Modern retellings often focus on the psychology of this relationship. Movies and books explore the inner battles that drive people to abandon their values.
These stories show that to understand corruption, we cannot just look at outside pressure, but our own inner weaknesses. Indeed, the story of Balaam refuses to wrap up with a neat, happy ending. Instead, it leaves us with uncomfortable questions and stark warnings that cannot be easily brushed aside. This complexity mirrors real life, where good intentions and deep flaws often blur together in unexpected ways. Balaam's life is a warning about the dangerous lure of fame and fortune. His reputation as a prophet brought him wealth and royal attention, yet these very privileges slowly ate away at his spiritual foundation. Success can easily become a trap, making us dependent and costing us our freedom. The story also shows how spiritual gifts can become a source of temptation rather than a blessing. Balaam's unique abilities opened the door to his own downfall. The privilege of speaking for God carried a heavy responsibility that he failed to honor, warning us about the dangers of spiritual influence. Churches and religious groups find a deep warning in Balaam's story. It shows how easily a sacred calling can be commercialized and corrupted. The line between earning a living and selling out requires constant watchfulness to maintain. At its heart, this account challenges our assumptions about how God speaks through flawed human beings. God still accomplished his purposes through Balaam, despite his divided heart and crooked motives. This shows that divine power works through us while rising far above our human weaknesses. Even flawed instruments can fulfill holy purposes. Balaam's slow moral slide reveals how corruption actually works. He did not turn into a villain overnight. Instead, small compromises built up over time until his original character was completely gone. It is a sobering warning that tiny ethical slip-ups can eventually lead to a total moral collapse. The story shows that inner integrity matters just as much as outward actions. Publicly, Balaam blessed Israel, but in secret, he plotted their ruin. This gap between appearance and reality reveals the danger of splitting our morals in half, a division that never lasts. Today, leaders and advisors can find a warning in the story of Balaam and Balak. The king's attempt to buy spiritual approval for his army mirrors modern leaders who seek religious backing for their own agendas. Balaam's initial refusal, followed by his surrender, shows how pressure can slowly wear down our strongest principles. The famous scene with the talking donkey offers the story's greatest lesson about spiritual sight and humility. Those in high positions can be completely blind to things that others see clearly. Wisdom often comes from the most unexpected places, while wealth and status are no guarantee of true understanding. Balaam's tragic end serves as a stark warning that consequences hunt down our choices no matter how we justify them. His death fighting Israel was the natural end of his path. The man who blessed Israel with his mouth while plotting their ruin with his advice ended up counted among their enemies. This story refuses to give us easy labels for good and evil. Balaam speaks holy truth while harboring corrupt motives. He shows real prophetic gifts while plotting a treacherous trap. This messiness mirrors the real world, where good and evil are rarely clean-cut. Today we face similar struggles when judging religious and political leaders. Balaam's story warns us against two extremes: throwing out everything a flawed person says, or blindly accepting words just because of spiritual gifts. Wise judgment demands we examine both character and claims. This story also tackles tough questions about God's justice and mercy. He used even Balaam's greed to bless Israel through an unwilling prophet. And yet this same God held Balaam responsible for his choices, letting the natural consequences unfold. Such a balance between divine sovereignty and human accountability runs deep through Scripture. But the most haunting warning is about self-deception. Balaam probably convinced himself that his little compromises were serving some higher noble purpose. We have a terrifying ability to rationalize keeping a high opinion of ourselves while sliding into darker behavior. Refusing to give easy answers, the story forces us to examine our own lives. Where is success breeding dangerous temptations for us? How are fame and money quietly eating away at our integrity? What tiny compromises are slowly building up toward a massive moral collapse? Balaam's legacy acts as a mirror reflecting the messy, complicated reality of human nature. His story warns us against easy labels while insisting on absolute personal responsibility. It challenges us to pursue honesty while admitting our own capacity for self-deception. The final echo brings us right back to where this strange journey began. A dirt path winds through the ancient wilderness. A prophet rides toward his final doom. A donkey sees what human eyes cannot. An angel waits with a drawn sword, guarding a purpose far beyond human understanding. That conversation between man and beast still echoes across the centuries. Its sheer absurdity hides deep truths about wisdom and blindness, power and humility, and the unexpected ways God speaks. In that moment of miraculous speech, every assumption about intelligence and pride completely falls apart. Balaam, son of Beor, remains one of Scripture's most mysterious figures. Neither a pure hero nor a simple villain, he embodies the complicated reality of human nature. His story refuses the comfort of easy answers, forcing us to face uncomfortable questions about our own integrity, about power, and how easily good intentions get corrupted. The prophet who spoke blessings while secretly harboring curses shows the tension inside all of us. The desire to do right battles with the craving for fame. Serving others always conflicts with the urge for self-promotion. These inner struggles shape our choices in quiet, deep ways. King Balak fades from memory, his frantic schemes totally useless. The curses he tried so hard to buy turned into blessings he could not prevent. His gold could not corrupt God's plans, though it corrupted the prophet he hired. Power searches for validation, but it can never buy it with money. The donkey disappears from the story right after its moment of miraculous speech, yet its simple words reveal truth more clearly than books of human wisdom. Sometimes the most humble voices carry the deepest messages. God's truth travels paths that human pride would never expect. The angel returns to the unseen world, its mission complete. Divine justice works through human choices while remaining far above our limitations. Even corruption is turned into an instrument for God's plans. Though this is no excuse for anyone who chooses compromise over integrity. Israel receives blessings they never asked for, from a prophet they never even met. God's favor acts on standards far beyond human control. The nation's destiny is shaped by the complex dance between divine sovereignty and human choices, blessing and cursing, loyalty and failure. The words Balaam spoke continue to echo through history. His predictions about Israel's future proved true in ways the prophet himself never fully understood. Truth spoken for the wrong reasons is still truth. God's message rises above the flaws of those who carry it. We face our own crossroads when we read this ancient story. The same temptations that ruined Balaam still threaten us today. Success, fame, and wealth still breed the same moral dangers. The story offers no easy answers, but demands honest self-reflection. That talking donkey reminds us that wisdom often shows up in the most unexpected places. People we think are powerful can be completely blind while simpler creatures see clearly. God's truth challenges our ideas about intelligence, education, and spiritual status. Balaam's final end is a warning that choices have consequences. The prophet who spoke blessings while plotting ruin ended up listed among Israel's worst enemies. In the end, compromise sets a path toward ruin, no matter how we try to justify it. The story ends without a neat resolution, its tensions still thick, its questions left unanswered. This mirrors how real life works, where good and bad tangle up in ways that defy easy judgment.
Life rarely offers the clean clarity we crave.
And so we return to the image that started our journey.
The dusty road stretches far beyond the end of the tale, fading into unseen horizons. Now we must choose our own path. These moral crossroads find us in every generation, forcing decisions that shape both our own souls and our shared future. The prophet and his donkey have said their piece. Yet their strange conversation still echoes in,
Challenging what we assume and revealing truths that comfortable religion would rather ignore.
In their brief clash, the divine breaks into the ordinary, turning a simple trip into a mirror of God's plans and human choices. The echo fades, but never dies. Somewhere on those old roads the talk continues. Truth still travels down unexpected paths. Angels still guard the way, and donkeys still see what prophets miss.